Oh my god, good morning! Oh my god, good morning everyone, good morning guys! Aliens? I mean, at this point, something in Egypt, something's going on there. Ah, fucking hilarious. There's a lot of really weird shit going on. So, kind of on the curious bit here, guys, that is adding more weird shit going on here. More weird shit going on. Yeah, like in addition to NHIs, UAPs, psionics, possibly suppressed psionics through somehow a block in our brain. In addition to that, and disclosure. Wow, there's so much shit going on here, and this is putting aside the political stuff too. The political shit's all over the place. Left has literally become completely bonkers. Like I pointed out yesterday, they're like setting fire to Teslas, guys. You think majority of fucking Teslas are owned by Republicans? They fucking aren't. They're owned by Democrats because they're pro-environmentalism, right? That's the big angle of EVs, is that, and they're basically setting fire to their own side's cars. But for some reason, they think it's Musk owns all the cars they're setting fire to. While they're creating arson. What? There's just like some poor Democrat, like, mother just like literally just goes into a shopping mall and comes back out and her car's keyed. Yo, the fuck is going on here? Yeah, good job, guys. You're doing great. You got them good. Not diesel trucks or anything like that. You literally targeted EVs. Fucking crazy. Absolutely crazy as shit. But you know, putting that aside, gee, yeah, like it's like both sides are crazy. Don't get me wrong, but we are clearly in a scenario where the left is much crazier than the right now, and that's saying a lot because I never used to. Well, I still don't really align with the right, but just instead of like the graphs where it's showing like the sides separating, it shows the left. Basically Democrats going further away from central than the right is. That's basically the case, which is pretty crazy. It's pretty fucking crazy, but. Like, I'm central, meaning I'm not neutral. I lean left or right depending on the issue. And there's a lot of issues right now, just, they're doing some really stupid shit. And, like, the weird thing about it is, like, they aren't smart enough to figure it out, which makes it even weirder. Like, they're like, hey, look, environmentalism, EVs, we were just literally fighting for this 6 months ago. Aren't most Teslas owned by Democrats? Nah, they're all owned by Elon Musk. Like, what? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, I'm not moving. It's just the left is moving further away. But something I just want to show you, kind of segue. As this kind of weird shit, guys. Just absolute weird shit. Segue here. Something I want to show you guys. So with us talking about the pyramid tubes, which are the giant fucking cylinders that are underneath the pyramids, supposedly under the pyramids, which there's going to be a tech release or another press event on the 24th, by the way. So in 2 days. Monday, there's going to be a press release on their YouTube channel, so we'll get more information. And right now, it's tough to figure out if it's like fake or not, purely because there's not much information online. That is, they had a press event in real life, which basically almost no one attended from the looks of it. I don't even know who attended that because there isn't a lot of information that came out of that. So, yeah. There's this guy, which was just introduced yesterday. Something I want to cover here with you guys real quick here is, so the F-47 is the new American fighter jet, right? 6th generation fighter jet, which is cool and everything. But the weird thing about this, and if you guys have been watching my channel, you know UHPs and NHIs, and basically we're definitely getting closer and closer to full disclosure. The JFK files, the Epstein files, all this shit coming out of the woodwork, right? UAP and NHI disclosure is definitely on the table. And one thing you'll actually notice is, so they introduced the new F-47. There's some artist renditions which I don't think are actually from the Air Force, so they take them with a grain of salt. People are saying this is a deltoid aircraft, meaning this is a front wing on it. So you can't actually see the shape, but this is basically was released by the Air Force. And why is this such a big deal, guys? Why is this such a big deal? Also, by the way, they had a... basically had a rock video to this, by the way. Yeah. F-16, F-22. Probably showed in front of it. United States Air Force, by the way. Yeah. But the interesting thing about this... The interesting thing here is... how this happened right after... basically all this disclosure is happening. Now we get to F-47. Why is this really, really interesting, guys? It's next generation. Nothing super outside the ordinary with that, right? It's next generation fighter. Besides it being obviously, you know, next gen, right? The difference in terms of development cycle between the F-16, which was a 4th generation fighter, and the F-22 is 30 years. There was a 30-year gap basically between when the F-16 popped out and when the F-22 popped out. The F-35, which is arguably kind of the, not really successor, but rather a cheaper, more versatile model of the F-22, was 2 years later. And that is 32 years after the F-16 came out, right? So we have a gap here between 4th and 5th generation jets that is 30 years, about 30 years. And the F-35 arguably came around because the F-22 didn't even have a threat. Most aggressors, what do you even call it? Most other countries that are, you know, like competitors with the U.S. have basically generation 4.5 aircraft. They don't really have stealth aircraft. Besides the allegedly the Chinese one that came out, you know, was it 2 months ago, I think? I think it was in January, where they started leaking photos of it. Kind of, sort of, might have been 5th generation, right? But for the most part, most adversaries of the U.S. are generation 4.5. They're kind of, sort of stealthy, but not nearly as stealthy as a F-35, let alone an F-22. F-22s are so expensive, we don't even fly them for the most part. They kind of don't really do anything. They're really expensive. Much more expensive than the F-35s. So we basically made a dumber version of F-22, which is an F-35, right? And now we are at 20 years after the introduction of the F-22, or 18 years after the introduction of the F-35, and now we have an F-47. So it's basically almost half the time from the F-16 to the F-22. More or less. I mean, it's 2/3 time if you're looking at F-22, and closer to, you know, closer to half if you're looking at the F-35. But the thing is, it gets weirder than that. Allegedly, supposedly, based on the information they're releasing, the F-47 has been flying for 5 years. So, not just 18 years from F-35 to F-47, we're talking 13 years from F-35 to F-47. And why does this really matter? Because there really isn't an aggressor. There isn't anyone that actually would be... like, they can barely deal with the F-22, let alone the F-35. And we have an F-47 rolling out? Why is this really weird? I mean, the timeline gets weirder here, guys. But this is right on the heels of UAP and NHI, what is appearing to be actual disclosure. And my guess is, if you see some of these renderings of this... my guess is this is actually based on tinfoil hat here, guys. Reverse UAP technology. Wings aren't even the fucking AI. The wings aren't even in the right spot on that thing. The fuck is that? My guess is we're looking at something that might be based on reverse UAP technology. This is probably the closest what I've seen to what it actually looks like. But the photo, this is actually from the USAF. Actually looks like it has a deltoid on it, a delta wing on it, which is the front thing. So if you ever see a second wing on the airplane in the front, that's a delta wing for stability. And this is probably what the closest rendering I've seen, and probably what it looks like is this thing right here. And potentially looking at something that might be reverse UAP technology. which is pretty crazy if you think about it. And you're like, yeah, there's no way that's possible. If you look at all the weird shit that is happening right now, if you look at all the weird shit that's going on right now, guys, it is highly likely that we are seeing. So this was flying once again. This not just prototype. They've been flying this thing for fucking 5 years. It's not just like it just popped out. It's not like it just popped out. This thing's been around for 5 years. This isn't something brand new that just happened. Like 13 years between the F-35 and the F-47 basically flying, which is insane. That's insanely fast. And this has basically been out for so long that potentially the Chinese even started copying it. Like they got intel and started copying the thing. Where's that photo of the NGAD? NGAD is, I believe, the new Chinese fighter. It looks like a wing. Potentially showing it off. Oh, right here. Yeah, these are pictures from like 2 months ago, I believe. A36. Yeah, so we might have already leaked intel, the design for the F-47, which is already basically flying, was possibly leaked to China, and they made their own model. Which is absolutely fucking hilarious. Absolutely fucking hilarious. But the interesting thing, like I said about this, is this actually seems like this is happening right around what possibly might be disclosure, and we're actually probably going to find out that some of these programs are actually designed using reverse UAP technology. Because if you haven't gotten that, guys, if you haven't figured that out already, they're looking more and more like spaceships, aren't they? Yeah. If you aren't figuring that out, these are looking more and more like alien aircraft. Fucking weird, isn't it? It's like we're in a Stargate timeline or something. But the thing is, that's sci-fi, right? Sci-fi is not reality, but more and more it's starting to look like reality is becoming sci-fi. Very, very weird shit. This is, by the way, this is the actual photo released from the USAF. All these are artists' impressions or a rendition of what they think it's going to look like, so it might not look exactly like this. This is the only picture that they've shown of it right here. These are all pictures from USAF. These other ones, this is fucking shitty AI. Artist's interpretation or rendition of it. Very, very curious. But yeah, as I mentioned, definitely looking more and more. They're looking more and more like alien spacecraft, aren't they? That's kind of weird, kind of curious bit there. Crazy shit, guys. Crazy world we live in. Anyways, I wanted to show this to you guys. This is the news from yesterday. This is like the weirdest thing about all this, guys, is this is all happening in like a 2-month span. 2025 is already insane. It is absolutely insane for so many reasons. It's not like just one topic just like drastically move forward, right? There's all these things happening at exactly the same time. And coincidences are one thing, but when you have like 7 coincidences, that's not a coincidence anymore. There's something else. Something's going on here. And I feel the need. There's another one. There's another one, by the way. The F-47 just popped out. There's just another one. In addition to our fucking pyramid tubes, by the way, which is probably one of the biggest things that be released this year, in addition to JFK, Epstein files, UAPs, NHIs, psionics, I guess the F-47. Now you have the fucking pyramid tubes. That's not it. That's not going to bring it up. It's still, I think it's still barely touched mainstream media. Pyramid tunnel. There's... Doesn't even bring it up in Google searches yet. There you go. Got like one Daily Mail. Daily Mail tends to, yep. Pyramid tubes. Like I said, it's actually going to be interesting if Egypt out of nowhere becomes one of the most technologically advanced countries on the planet. Just going to point that out. It is one of the things that's probably not on your bingo card for this year, but maybe it is. Because there's a lot of really weird shit going on right now. So these are the, by the way, I don't think there's, the information for the shit's all over the place, and very few places actually include the scan data, like the things that they saw so far in the press release. Once again, there's another one in 2 days. And this is what it looks like, and how do you get tubes out of this? Because this is underground, and it's looking at basically an acoustic profile of what's under the pyramids, and that's where the fucking tubes are coming from for the artist, the CG rendition. And this isn't really, like, I'm gonna keep pointing, this isn't something they can build, guys. Ancient Egyptians can't, people are theorizing that these are piles. They're hollow. Piles aren't hollow. Piles are what the skyscrapers they put into the ground. They put piles into the ground, deep into the ground, so the building is extremely stable, right? Piles are not hollow. They're tubes filled with fucking steel and concrete. These are hollow tubes. Hollow tubes generally do not benefit the stability of a giant fucking pyramid. So, just gonna throw that out there right now. These are legitimately hollow tubes, and they're gigantic and a mile deep. And it's something that ancient Egyptians can't even fucking make in the first place. It's funny, guys. I've always poked fun. Well, not really poked fun. I've always pointed out that even if ancient aliens built the pyramids, today there's almost no way for us to prove it, because we have basically all the information we can get, right? It's you know, thousands of years old. That's basically it. There's nothing new there. It's like the fucking aliens were listening to my stream and went, what if we just give them disclosure through the pyramids or something? Like, what the fuck is going on here? Absolutely crazy shit, guys. Because that's it. Like, even if you want to believe that the aliens built the pyramids, there's just nothing new to go off of there. There's nothing at all. Unless they find giant underground complexes underneath the fucking pyramids. It's not just the pyramids, by the way. It's an entire Giza plateau. So this is just under the pyramids, but there's another one. I don't know if this scan's going to show up here. There's another scan that literally shows, basically, there's structures under the Giza plateau is basically under all the pyramids. There is a structural, they can't go far enough, that's why they didn't really show it. But like one of the scans shows like they're finding stuff basically a mile below the surface that looks like structures under the Giza plateau. Absolutely ridiculously insane. Like, you can't make this shit up. This is crazy, and that's why people are calling them on this too. Like, right? Like, is this even something that's possible? Like, and then people are like, also, by the way, this is not the paper from 22. Some people are saying it's the paper from 22. It's not. This is not. They have a paper from 22, which is basically when they scan the top of a different pyramid. But this is not that. This is a different pyramid, and it's under the pyramid as well. Once again, they're actually going to reveal more on the 22nd. But absolutely, ludicrously insane. Yeah, so like, the weird thing is, like, you go online, there's people actually saying, how do you get this from this? Like, you can literally see that, like, what it looks like, right? It's entirely possible. You have to understand that basically you're looking at essentially something that loses sensitivity the further underground it goes, so it's going to lose sensitivity towards the bottom of basically the ground. You aren't going to be able to see stuff further under the ground because it's just not sensitive enough and too much interference. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we also have F-47s popping up, and then we have this shit. Like, what? Like, you know, F-47, crazy. NHI's UAP is also crazy. Disclosure possibly being crazy. Epstein, the fucking, the JFK files, lots of weird shit in the JFK files, also crazy. And then you have these giant fucking tubes down under the pyramid. Like, they've been there forever, just no one found them. Hilarious. Absolutely, like, you can't make this shit up, guys. Like I said, sometimes it feels like someone or something's watching my stream and just giggling to itself when it does shit like this. Because like I said, I've joked about this. Like, it'd be great if aliens built the pyramids, but there's no way we can prove it. So that's basically where the conspiracy theories stop on that. Is like, I can't believe in it because there's no way, there's nothing new, there's nothing there, right? But fucking ancient Egyptians, literally, not only do they not know how to build piles, because that'd be something they barely understand, but at the same time, also, they're hollow and legitimately under the ancient pyramids. Insane. Absolutely insane shit, guys. So we'll have to wait till the 24th. Maybe these guys are full of shit, but once again, this is an Italian. This is from an Italian, what do you call that? An excavation firm? Not excavation. Italian, I don't know. They're a particular group or business, and they have a press release for it, and there's 3 scientists that worked on the 22 paper, which also worked on this, which is what we're seeing now. So this is actually from scientists who, I mean, they aren't going to just spout random shit and just completely lose their mind. What age did you become a conspiracy theorist? I dabble on the line between stuff where we have evidence and stuff where we don't have evidence. In this case, these are scans, so not really conspiracy theory. If the scans are fake, which is what people are questioning, but they're legit from real scientists and they're legit from a real firm, so not really. Like we're past, like, I'm looking at literally white papers of shit. We aren't really in conspiracy theory territory anymore. Conspiracy theory is where you can't use evidence or anything to back up what you're talking about, right? That's not what's happening right here. This is from a press release on the 15th from the company is called Expedition, and they got a couple other things after it. I forgot what it is. They have a YouTube channel for their company, and it's 3 scientists that have been working on it. They have a white paper from 22. And the white paper from 22 scans they scanned a different pyramid, just the top area of it. This, however, is a different pyramid. Yeah, I mean, not really conspiracy theory anymore, although maybe. I mean, it could be fake and then it's conspiracy theory shit, but so far it's not, and everything we've seen is not, so. I don't know. I don't, yeah. Like, people want hard evidence, and yeah. There's no way ancient Egyptians could have built this shit, so, and obviously the first thing that, if I was the Prime Minister or President of Egypt, I'd 100% be trying to safely burrowing under the fucking pyramid into the tunnels and figuring out what the fuck's in there. Because they can 100% do that nowadays. Maybe they're doing it right now, I kind of doubt it though. You could 5,000% burrow into one of these tubes and get inside. Because my guess is, like, the weird thing about these guys is, like, they look like they have access shafts on them, right? Which people are theorizing are basically these are hollow tubes, and they have hallways or runs around them, which people are thinking are, you know, walkways, so they could be access shafts. So the weird thing is there's possibly actually a way into this from the pyramid itself, but they haven't actually figured it out, which is also kind of hilarious. But you don't want to destroy a pyramid, so you just dig underneath it, right? There's 5,000% ways that they can do this without disturbing the pyramid itself, so. I don't know, guys. We live in a really, I mean, fucking conspiracy theory shit? Yeah. Did you basically see the government's flying UFO? Uh-huh. I don't know, there's a lot of, like, the thing about it is, like, I believe heavily in statistics and probability, and it is very, like, when we're talking about EOMM and DDA and Marvel Rivals, when you lose a bunch of games in a row, it becomes statistically improbable that that's going to happen over and over and over again. Like having a coin flip because you're playing against people around your skill level, right? Yeah. And I believe in data and what we're seeing here, and like I'm willing to have an open mind about things. There's a lot of people that get kind of trapped in their own thoughts and what has to be what reality is, right? Reality literally just follows whatever's observable and stuff that we can see and interact with in science, right? It doesn't matter if you came up with some weird-ass headcanon as to why something should work a certain way, because that's in your mind, that's your fantasy. It all depends on, you know, reality is what happens in real life. It doesn't matter what you thought the pyramids were. Like, I talked about this yesterday when we were talking on stream about this. Not about that. Can I close the pyramid tab? No. So we were talking about this yesterday on stream. Like the pyramids, we kind of made up our weird-ass headcanon. Weird-ass headcanon as to why, you know, the pyramids were built, right? With pulleys and levers and sticks. It's basically we just made up our own shit as to how it could potentially have been done. That doesn't mean it was the way it was done. We weren't there to watch it or see it. We couldn't observe it, and then we were looking at hieroglyphs and see if they can kind of show us a way, right? But that's pretty much it. A lot of it's our own interpretation of events that happened based on what we can think they might have been able to do back then. More recent research has actually shown that they thought they used hydraulic lifts. So basically, they used tubes filled with water to help push up, basically columns of stone, right? As like a way of being an elevator, right? So we basically just make up our own shit as to how something works, and sometimes it does, and that's just the way it is. And there's no way to disprove it. And it's most logical conclusion, most logical reality. So that's just what we go with, right? But in this case, you can't make up. There's no way ancient Egyptians had the idea or the know-how to build mile-long tubes below their pyramids and actually not have them cave in. Like it is next to impossible. Like, you know how long we spent in mines, guys, mining shit out and barely understood like kind of the how to prevent cave-ins and eventually just getting better at it. And now we use like the, what do they call it, the steel pile things, which people never used to use. Where they timbered out the mine, but then they started using the thing where they shoot basically just giant, I think they function as stress reliefs, giant rods into the earth, and it basically functions as a way to prevent cave-ins with the nets on them. In addition to, obviously, also timbering things out, or not timbering, but leaving structural columns in certain places, right? But, like, for us, burrowing sideways, like, we use a TBM, like a tunnel boring machine. They're gigantic moving buildings. You've never seen one. It's like the stuff from the not the Third Element. These are TBMs. They're like the thing from the Fifth Element? No. What's the Planet movie? Also, the weird shit about this is like reminds me of the fucking Planet movie too. Where Arnold Schwarzenegger goes to Mars and he terraforms it. Total Recall. Total Recall. They also had a tunnel boring machine in Total Recall, by the way, which is also very fucking weird. We aren't going to get too much into the tinfoil hat stuff tonight, guys, but there is seemingly a lot of coincidences in our fucking media between, like, what's sci-fi and what's starting to happen in real life. And it's going beyond our, like, Star Trek, voice communicator, the little guy that whip open, which is a cell phone, right? Yeah, we're getting into some really fucking weird shit. This is basically what we use in real life to build giant fucking underground tunnels for basically, like highways, right? And not only these things move slowly and they cost a shitload of money and actually really cool engineering marvels, they basically put, when they're going through, it's like a slug moving through. When it goes through, basically it puts the concrete around it while it's moving through it. If you look at it, you can actually see how these are like little, planks or like cylinders. These are actually preformed pieces of concrete that it puts on the side of it as it pushes through basically the dirt and lines the tunnel. Like, this is basically where we've reached, right? But these things don't go straight down, and it's a whole nother complex actually going a mile into the ground in a giant fucking tube than it is. These things don't go straight down. It'd be a huge undertaking being able to do that without getting it to cave in the first place. So how these are here and hollow, still hollow, is... yeah. I don't know. I don't know, guys. There's not really, yeah. I don't know. It's funny because people are memeing about it, but the pyramids where it shows an obelisk where it goes even further underground is a new meme, right? Which actually apparently isn't a meme. This meme is making its rounds. This is the picture of the pyramids, right? Because everyone's theorizing. There's the tinfoil hat moment here. So conspiracy theory is that the pyramids were used for generating power or a death ray or all sorts of weird shit, right? Conspiracy theorists come with all sorts of weird shit. But, yeah. I agree, and that's on the 24th. Well, not the peer review part of it, but they're going to have another tech release on the 24th. But right now, like, these guys aren't just... This isn't just a rando making YouTube videos. These guys actually have a reputation in real life, and they're actual scientists. They don't want... They're there to be laughed out of the scientific community and never be allowed to study the pyramids ever again. So, like, it's not like they're just making shit up. Because it's neat, right? Conspiracy theories love neat shit. And I agree, and obviously it has to be verified and vetted and everything like that, but we're in holding pattern right now, so there's no way to, like, I definitely would not say it's fake, but if, like, for instance, 3 months go by and we hear nothing from them, it's probably, bullshit at this point, or maybe they got it, maybe they got disappeared. I'm not exactly sure, but, like, for now, they already have a YouTube press conference that they're going to release on YouTube on the 24th, so that's what I read. And, you know, obviously if it's just like one picture or whatever, but the thing about conspiracy theories, guys, and people in real life is, especially when they have a reputation in a completely different field. Like, when we talk about UAPs, one of the best sources for UAP information is if you see a newscast and some weird shit on the newscast, because newscast is highly reputable, and not necessarily from what they report, but rather they're not there to report on aliens. They aren't there to start a conspiracy theory, and they probably don't even want to be known for it, because then it takes, like, they don't want to be the crazy quack, right? And then at the same time, that's not what they're trying to film in the first place. So, like the wildfires, for instance, in January. Also, wildfires this year in January in California, right? If you look at some of this weird shit that's going on here, like newscasts tend to be like one of the most reputable sources of information, because what they're trying to do has nothing to do with giving you information on UAPs. So it immediately makes it credible, as not necessarily that you know what it is, but rather that it was saw and it was recorded properly, and not AI footage or someone trying to make clicks on YouTube or something like that. Maybe there'll eventually be a niche for it, but that's clearly not what newscasts or news stations are currently doing. But another example of a company that has nothing to do with kind of the conspiracy theorists that also aid in conspiracy theory or proving something more or less. But this right here, these guys, I mean, obviously they want to find shit, but I'm guessing they didn't actually expect to find this. And I guarantee you guys, like, if the president of Egypt decides he's going to burrow under the ground into this, which he should, by the way, he 100% should do this as soon as possible, like burrow under the pyramid into one of these tubes, and he finds out it's not there, heads are going to roll. Maybe metaphorically or actually literally, heads are going to roll. So they obviously have a little bit on the line, more so than just spreading FUD online for some clicks on their YouTube. Which, by the way, their YouTube has, I think the last time I looked at the video, it had like 40,000 views, which is insane. These guys, like the conspiracy theorists, like her, these guys have a boatload of views. But the actual website, here, I'll show it to you guys. The actual website for the organization that found this is their YouTube has like no one on it. This is a website. This is the actual company. This is kind of fucking weird. I don't understand this. This is like, I think her personal YouTube channel, but this is where the company releases the stuff too. So this is like, if you guys have ever been part of a family company, you know how kind of they do weird shit. This very much feels like that. But anyways, they have the two press releases, are these two guys right here. If you look at them, they have almost no views, despite the fact that they're basically talking about something huge. And that's pretty much it. And then they're going to have another one on... Wait, these used to have a subscription. He unsubscribed them. No, this one still does. Changed. What is this? I actually just made a tweet about this to someone else, stating that if someone actually has the subscription, they could check. So this had a subscription. Oh, this one did. This is new. This was under subscription earlier today. I looked at this. It's no longer in a subscription. It says subscription here. Subscribe. How do you guys feel about watching a This was subscribers only, like, I want to check like 4 hours ago. I mean, maybe we'll go into just chatting here, guys.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti, sono Nicole Ciccolo, responsabile dell'area comunicazione del progetto.
Let's see.
ricerca.
Well, hey guys, I guess we're gonna change this a little bit here. Let me see. I'm gonna. Unfortunately, I can't show shit on TikTok, so we're gonna turn off the TikTok stream here. You can always turn it back on. And we're gonna take a look at this because I'm actually really curious now. And you'll have to get a coffee. I didn't think I'd be doing this today. Like this earlier, guys. This was under subscription earlier, and it looks like they changed that. Probably once again because it seems weirdly like I think she's a PR person. She is trying to make like her channel, but her channel also isn't completely. The three guys, I think, are these three guys here, are actual the scientists that worked on this. Yeah, she's a communication area of the project. That's her. That's her right here. But she like kind of has like this set up like her personal YouTube instead of a company. Or maybe she's responsible for the money for it. I don't actually know how this works out. Yeah, okay. We're going to change things here, guys. I didn't think this was a thing, and no one's talking about this, so we're going to change categories here to just chatting. This is interesting. Well, this is different. There's going to be a press conference on the 24th. I am 100% going to take a look at this, though. This is, once again, this is probably, assuming this is legit, this is one of the biggest things to happen in, well, forever, if this is actually legitimate. So we have to take a look at this. I'm going to grab a coffee, guys, and put in my contacts. One second. Alrighty, guys. Well, oh, buddy. Well, let's see where things go. This, as I mentioned before, this was private. Coffee's brewing right now. This was private approximately 4 hours ago. It was subscribers only, and I wasn't going to subscribe because I didn't know what it was, and I'm not spending money on that, right? But now it's available to the public. We'll see how good the auto-translate subs are. And by the way, something to stipulate here, guys. If you've ever worked with a small company, they don't do things perfectly. Sometimes it's a shit show. But that doesn't mean, for instance, whatever they're producing is going to suck or it's not, verifiable. So this reminds me an awful lot of something that's maybe family run or it's a personal business or, maybe that's not up to the same standards as like a company in the U.S., right? Like what would that be, like a Forbes 500 company? So keep that in mind. This seems like this is her personal YouTube, but it's also being used to release the company. But it's unclear whether or not she actually maybe is the benefactor of the company itself, like she's running things. So I don't know exactly what the relationship is here. Either way, this was privated earlier, and these are auto translations, so we'll see how good they are. YouTube or AI in general has gotten a lot better, and it's entirely possible that this will be perfectly translated, but take it with a grain of salt. Like if I was in their position, guys, I'd 100% pay for a dub. You can get someone to read this and basically charge minimal money.
Chiamato progetto Teflon. Diamo il benvenuto a tutta la stampa italiana accreditata in presenza
I can put this somewhere where you can read this.
collegata in remoto. Questa è una
720p. No alignment option. I wish there was. I can't move it. It wants to sit on the left side of the screen.
conferenza stampa speciale
Well, I'll move
in esclusiva
the
i
text.
risultati di uno studio assolutamente innovativo e rivoluzionario reso possibile dall'unione di un team di ricercatori che hanno le loro specifiche competenze storico-archeologiche.
I don't know how you can move it to... I saw it move there for a little bit. I used to be able to move it to the right. Yeah.
Scientifiche e tecnologiche, in particolare il professor Corrado Nanda, ricercatore e capo del progetto di ricerca, l'ingegner Filippo Biondi, specialista in tecnologia SAR, e il dottor Armando Mi, esperto di egittologia.
Also, sorry for the green screen, guys. Sun's coming up.
SAR,
My enemy.
ad apertura sintetica, combinata con la nuova metodologia della tomografia Doppler, il gruppo di ricerca qui presente ha fatto una serie di scoperte senza precedenti, localizzate sotto la piana di Giza.
So, a couple of the things that people are already asking questions about. First, I want to stipulate, guys, they have a 22 white paper on their research. It was done on a different pyramid with older techniques and using basically older technology. They have since improved it, and one of the things people are curious about right now is basically how they improved it, which they briefly talked about in the other two videos, which they also talked about, basically the technology. Briefly talked about the technology, and then basically I think they're going to go more into it right now, which is basically SAR, which is I've been known about for a while, but people are talking about how it doesn't go deep enough underground. They basically refined it and used multiple different methods to basically make a model what would you call that? Where you combine like different things together. An amalgam, I guess, really, but there's actually a name for it. Basically, they combined multiple different techniques to basically to make the model that they're working on right now, to make the stuff that they're working on right now, which they're probably going to explain better than obviously I can because I barely understand it in the first place. Let me grab my coffee, guys, and then we're going to be good to go. What I actually kind of want to point out is it's actually kind of curious how few people took the time and effort, despite how big some of these tweets have blown up online. Not mine, obviously. Have blown up online. Very few places have actually taken time to find the source, which is what we're looking at right here. The source of information, and they're all basically parroting the same thing, which I guess is easy, but it really didn't take that much effort for me to figure it out, and I assume other people can, and I even tweeted it at multiple people so they'd figure it out too. But I guess not.
Tecnologica consiste nel convertire le informazioni radar fotoniche in segnali fononici.
Birds' photonic radar information into sound signals. This would allow us to explore structures buried. Is there a sub to YouTube? Sub to audio? Sub to voice audio? Translate to speak for YouTube. Translate speak to YouTube. This is, by the way, this is going to be long, and as such, I think this is a good idea. What do we got here? 400,000 users, 40,000 users, 3.3, 3.5. Can't keep up. Stopped working properly. Well, we'll find out. Voice. We want UK English male.
Welcome all the accredited Italian press in attendance and all the press connected. Remotely, this is a special press conference to reveal exclusively the results of an absolutely innovative and revolutionary study made. Remotely, this is a special press conference to reveal exclusively the results of an absolutely innovative and revolutionary study made. Possible by the union of a team of researchers who have combined their specific historical, archaeological, scientific, and technological skills.
Christ. Alright, subtitles. On. I have to do some tweaking here. Maybe I can tweak this in a side window too. By the way, guys, technology is phenomenal. If you aren't getting that right now, I'm literally using text, auto-translated text to voice. Oh, I could be a fucking VTuber, guys. I just need some bigger boobs. I could be a VTuber. Oh my god, I get so many subscriptions. Imagine if I was a VTuber and doing this. Oh my god, there'd be so many people watching right now simply for my boobas, and then we'd actually be changing the world at the same time. Crazy. Let's see if I can change this.
In particular, Professor Corrado Malanga, researcher and head of the Research Project Engineer, Filippo Biondi, specialist in SAR technology, and Dr. Armando Me, expert in Egyptology, thanks to the synthetic aperture SAR radar technology, combined with the new methodology of Doppler tomography. The research group present here has made a series of unprecedented discoveries located under the Piana Dome.
There we go. We got the BBC going on here.
VIPSA. This technological innovation consists in converting photonic radar information into sound signals. This would allow us to explore structures buried deep under the Earth's surface. To talk about the research that we have done. It is an innovative research that actually starts several years ago when we started working on the pyramid of Kipnalasu, as it is called by the experts.
There we go.
From that point of view, we have started to write scientific papers and books that talked about what we have found with the synthetic aperture radar.
So this is their prior research they're covering right now.
Synthetic aperture radar is a technique that involves using a radar placed at about 680 kilometers of height in orbit around the planet that transforms photonic signals into phonemic signals. That is, it transforms light into sound, into vibration, everything.
So, like an
that we can
ultrasound.
therefore see is a sound image of the things we go to see. This technique allows us to look inside things as you know,
Exactly like an
photons,
ultrasound.
light stops in
Well, kind of like an ultrasound.
front of money, but sound doesn't. Granite has a speed of
He's talking about basically how they
sound of about 4,000 meters.
not harmonize it, but rather tune it for the material it's going through.
1,400 meters, air 340 meters per second. So if we manage to transform light into sound, what will appear to us is that granite is more transparent than glass. This allows us to see inside.
So they were able to essentially attune it
Ancient
for the
monuments
material,
like
which
the
is
3
granite.
floors of the gizzard plant without Spa. Going to look more closely at the structure of these spots, we clearly realize, and these machines do you have two, but in reality there are 5, 2 in front, 2 behind, and 1 in the middle.
Talking about the structures in the pyramid itself.
These spots are similar to the same spots that we
Old
recorded
stuff,
in
is it?
one.
No, this is new stuff too. Some people are quoting the older information.
Pyramid, it is a zen of a structure that we had essentially already seen in the pyramid that we had analyzed. Of these structures, there are 5 now. Tomorrow in the
Let's see if I can fix the timing here, guys. Got read aloud to be pretty good time.
Conferenza Stampa # Giza. Armando
Good, too.
May, Filippo Biondi, Corrado Malanga.
Speed, pitch.
Star Conferenza Stampa Giza SA. Small diamond share prezzi il nostro lavoro, puoi sostenerci con una o piccola donazione. More. Criminal conference we will show how we arrive at these results because with the radar we can make different tomographies looking at the scene from multiple points of view, and thus build a three-dimensional image perfectly reconstructing stone by stone everything we see. A single tomograph is not enough. This image alone would not be enough to arrive at the solution to the problem that we will then show you. With the construction of a three-dimensional model, this is an image taken from another point of view. You must always have the same objects placed from another angle, and the awareness of these images must enter inside us, and this can only be done by looking at these images for hours, going back to look at the old topographies, going back to look at the new ones, trying to identify each structure in a three-dimensional way. At this point, we could finally build a three-dimensional model of our research, and we immediately realized tomorrow we will understand better, because we will show piece by piece how we
Still some
arrived at
translation
these
errors,
results
but better.
that in the pyramid of Kaffa, that until the day before yesterday and the Egyptologists said there was nothing, that is an empty mountain of stones. Basically, there are a lot of things. There are 5 Zeps.
I want to point out, guys, remember how earlier we were talking about me becoming a conspiracy theorist, right? I follow what we can look at, see, and where science goes. It doesn't matter if you have made-up headcanon of there's nothing there, there's nothing going on. It's like troubleshooting a computer, right? When something breaks, it doesn't matter whether or not you understand that your power supply is broken and it's making weird shit. You just have to try it anyways and see if it's a fucking power supply, right? That's just the way it goes. But in a lot of cases, there's people that literally will go, no, it can't be this. I remember arguing with one of my friends back in, I think it was when after I left college. This is like over a decade ago. I was arguing with one of my friends that's helping him troubleshoot his PC, and he was dead set on it not being able to be something because he like checked it in a different way. I think it was his memory was fucked up, and he checked it in a different way and it was unstable. But then when we checked it again, it was broken, and he couldn't like wrap his mind around it because it wasn't supposed to be bad in the first place. Like, people come up with all these preconceived notions in their mind, at which reality can't basically reject it, right? They have their headcanon in their mind. They're made of fantasy in their mind of what's going to happen. But it doesn't matter whether or not you understand it or not. You just know that this data is now showing you fucking tubes under the pyramids. It doesn't matter how ludicrous that is. You have to understand that, hey, we're looking at this now. Now we have to figure out if this is error, what's going on here. It doesn't matter if someone thinks it's just like piles of stone underneath or whatever. It doesn't matter, because it's clearly something is there now, right? It doesn't matter if you don't think aliens built the pyramids, or maybe they did. It doesn't matter at this point. We follow what's showing up here with our sensors and what we're actually making out. So it's kind of the way things go. And obviously, keeping an open mind is the most important part.
5 places in a certain position,
Talking about
connected to each
the
other
little
by
houses on
probable
the
paths
inside the
that
pyramid
could
right now.
actually be corridors, but what we see is that
Yes.
underneath this
It'd be nice if you had a laser pointer.
structure there are 8 vertical wrists surrounded by something that resembles a kind of, if you will pardon the term,
God, please. Is there just no speed up? I mean, we could set it to 100%.
spiral staircase EHM. You see them here from another angle, from another point of view. You see them here again from another point of view. Look how much stuff there is in there. how many paths can be. Made there are 2 rooms in particular. You see one large on the right behind and
Needs the laser pointer.
the other on the left a little smaller at the back that appear in the different tomographies and that are certainly something that resembles.
He's looking at these guys right now here in the back and on the side. Something to point out here, I believe, is the Caffrey Pyramid. Most of these rooms do not... This is new, by the way. Most of this stuff is new. These rooms up top are new. Not because they didn't exist, but rather they weren't ever observed, I guess is a way to put that. They weren't ever observed. The primary chamber, as best I know, is observed. Then there's a little chamber down here in the bottom, which I believe is called the Queen's Chamber. Down here at the bottom below it, or the unfinished chamber. I think there's one here, and then there's one below it, which aren't on here. But these 4 on the side, and these side chambers are not actually, which are apparently connected, or at least they're saying are connected by what looks like a pathway, aren't actually, like, known, I guess you could say, haven't been known prior to this point. I'm not an expert on pyramids, by the way.
Rooms look at how it appears to us from the front, and these vertical wells that go down to a certain depth. These vertical wells, how can we see them? From the tomographies it will appear very, very clear up to what depth this stuff goes. The attempt was to understand this. You see, we put a kind of clear whether that simulates a path of water, because actually under a certain height EHM of the ground zero, let's say, of the pyramid underneath, there is water under the path of water.
Water table?
There is still stuff, and we go down until we find 2 structures of this kind. That seem, when you look at them for the first time, you see and understand what it is. They are actually 2 boxes, 2 big giant boxes that we will discover later have about EHMMH as.
So they're talking about the boxes at the bottom of
the dimensions of 80 meters on each side.
So
2 boxes of 80 meters.
So he's not showing up here in the drawing, but based on what we've seen online, these right now he's talking about basically finding boxes at the bottom, and these are the boxes here. I'm guessing, so the density is, the heavier the color, the denser it is. And he's looking basically at the density below the columns here, which are these things right here. As best as I can figure out from what he's talking about.
Phenomenon of pareidolia, as one might imagine, but it is the same computer that tells us, look, this is how the boxes are made. And the computer, with its analyses and with the help of artificial intelligence,
We're using AI.
reconstructs these 2 boxes, as you can see here, in which...
Guys, I want to point out, there's a lot of fucking... It's weird. We live in a really weird time right now. AI is 5,000% never going away. You can guarantee it, like, as long as we're a civilized society or just world, AI is not going away. We outlaw in the U.S., someone else is going to use it. AI is indisposable in its ability to not only basically learn, but do superficial tasks really, really well, like analyzing boatloads of data. I was weird. I had an argument with someone a couple days ago on Twitter where they were talking about, like, we're talking about, you know, how JFK released a shitload of files. It's like 60,000 pages. And there's even more. There's like 10,000 pages per day just popping out. And I was having, there's the irrational hate of AI. I think someone was bad-mouthing Joe Rogan because he suggested using AI to do it. Everyone should be suggesting using AI to not completely analyze, but starting the analysis, right? It's my best way of describing AI, guys, is like the it is the research assistant. Do they still make errors? Sure. But are they, you know, indisposable when it comes to your research and basically doing ground or basic research? Yeah, especially in our case, going through 60,000 pages. Historians are, for 5,000%, they're going to go through forever, right? It's going to take them years. But being able to put together bits and pieces and, like, you know, find everything that kind of aligns with itself right out of the gates, which is also why this is important for figuring out, you know, aliens or other habitable worlds, because there's so many stars we can't parse it ourselves, right? You'd have to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people, which still would be, you know, inconceivably small compared to what AI can do. And it's just the way things are. It helps immensely. It's just how you use it, right? And it's not going away. It doesn't matter how much you fear for your job, but it's just the way things are going to be. And obviously, we're going to have to deal with that at some point as well, but it is very, very helpful.
4 of the tubes that start from the top and go down enter each box. We are at a depth of 648 m, only at this level 648 meters.
He's not really doing a good job of it, but if you can imagine them taking a look from the side, kind of through the ground, I believe that's the angle it's looking at right now. So, like, if the pyramid's right here, this is like going in like this at an angle, and you were looking at the angle of the cylinders going down, and the boxes are at the bottom of them, right down here.
Let's look at how they appeared to our tomography, the tubes that you see. How they are made here are 8. They are inlet, say like this, placed in 2 rows at the center of the side of the pyramid, and you see that there you can see well surrounded by something that looks like a kind of spiral staircase that goes down. This spiral staircase, we have reconstructed it substantially. Like this, you see there are 2 boxes, in which in each box 8. Plus 4 go down on one side and 4 on the other. EHM, we are at 648 meters after what happens. We needed, so we had realized that in looking with this technique EHM at the synthetic opening these things.
I don't know what EHM is. I don't know if that's a
Not only had we
translation
found
error
in
or
the
what it is.
pyramid of Kaffa a lot of stuff that no one had ever seen, but by moving away a little with the vision, we had seen that underneath there was stuff, and then we had to move away even further, and in a tomography that tomorrow we will see piece by piece, you can see a inside at the half of this gigantic tomography you see at the top, the pyramid of Kaffa.
So,
On the left, hidden A by the
I've seen this already online. This is this is the scan of the entire Giza Plateau, and this right here is the Khafre Pyramid. And what this means is below, this is like basically a giant, if you can zoom out with Google Maps, this is like a giant overview of the Giza Plateau, and they're looking at basically infrastructure, what might be other buildings way underground under the Giza Plateau.
gray tones of the tomography, there is the small pyramid, EHM. EHM, which is the smallest pyramid of the plan, while EHM in reality on the invisible right, there is the pyramid of Klunkufu, but you have to keep in mind that when we do a tomography, we cut a
Yeah, and the right's doing a
this
laser
tape
pointer,
has
but I
been
can't see the
cut
laser
in
pointer in
half
the
of
video.
pyramid of Kaffa in half. The photographic plate that comes out, since it has the information of the vibration, is not affected by all the pixels of all the points that are inside the vibration of the plate, but by everything that is in front and everything that is behind, thus building an image that at the beginning for the non-experts is difficult to understand, but that later allows you to understand it is a fundamental thing. Look, let's take only the central part of this tomography, and what we see is that under the central triangle that represents the 2 sides of the pyramid of Kaffa at about.
Bro, you can get a stronger laser pointer, for fuck's sakes. Use like a little laser pen.
A circa
640 meters, there is this square box. This luminous plane that contains the 2 boxes that I showed you before, where you can glimpse them with this type of Response, even the channels that go down that you see here can be understood only.
I can't see the
Because
I can't see the
showed
laser
it to
pointer
you
at
in
all
the
on the right,
previous
guys.
tomography, the problem is, but underneath there is still stuff we go down for another 600 meters, and this allows us to understand that underneath there is a world that is made up of many things. For example, here underneath we are. Underneath the plane, underneath the pyramid of Cheops and all this stuff. Here, what is all this luminous stuff that vibrates when we go to do and...
So obviously he's talking about the brighter
Tomorrow
spots.
we will show it some enlargements.
So
We
tomorrow,
will
I think...
discover that underneath there is a real city in inverted commas we are like.
I think what he's talking about tomorrow, he's talking about tomorrow, which I believe is their next press conference. This was yesterday. So I think he's talking about tomorrow as in Monday, which is when there's supposedly going to be I didn't think this was actually here. I thought this was something else. But they released this yesterday. But once again, it used to be paid, but now it's not paid anymore. And I believe when he says tomorrow, he means next work day, which is on Monday, which is when they have another scheduled press release. So he's mentioning that they're going to have some different shots, which... if they've been doing this, guys, for basically years at this point, because the last paper they did was on 22nd, or excuse me, the 2022, the 22nd, 2022. If their last paper was on 2022, they've had years to work on this stuff, and obviously they have, I'm sure they have plenty of shots. And he said they're going to do some zoom shots Monday, is my guess, is how he's wording this.
Depth at about 1,200 meters off. Depth, how do you calculate this? We know that a pixel is long x cm.
So he's saying that you have the tubes, you have a box down here which is 640 meters, and then there's stuff even further underneath the box, which is like one of those things. There's stuff even further down. Yeah. So first off, if this is there, guys, there is no way, in any way, shape, or form, that you can come up with some sort of bullshit explanation as far as ancient Egyptians being able, like, it's either some sort of lost civilization or NHIs. That's all we basically have to go off of. There's no way they can burrow down this far, and this stuff is still there. That's the weird thing about this. They're talking about hollow tubes and hollow buildings. That's like, they have to be structurally sound enough to be able to weather earthquakes over time. They aren't piles. That's what some people asserted, is these guys are piles. Piles are basically a bunch of steel rods and concrete that are poured into the ground for basically stability of a building, right? These are hollow. This is the exact opposite of what you'd want for stability. So
just take the number of pixels that is given to us by the computer, and
he's trying to talk about the scale
we
right
know
now.
exactly what we have in front of us. Tomorrow we will also show how.
Monday.
The human eye would see these things if it were technically placed on the satellite. I remind you that we have used 2 satellites, not just one. So the 2 satellites give us completely coherent answers, so everything
Talking about
that
cross-referencing.
could be a sound reflection, we know how to identify it
Multiple angles from different satellites for
perfectly, because
cross-referencing.
it is a sound reflection that we see on one satellite.
Obviously,
on
you'd
the
want to
other, it
have
is
3.
not there
So
because
this is the same
other
way, like,
satellite is somewhere else, and therefore
so this is basically the same way like GPS works, only they have 2 data points. Maybe they don't have more satellites. It's just kind of the way things work, right? But basically, he's talking about basically how they have 2 satellites, one over here and one over here, right? And he's using basically the cross-reference image to weed out the noise and the differences in the pictures that might not be accurate, right? In the case of GPS, you're using 3 satellites for GPS, and GPS is extremely accurate. Obviously not the same thing, and this is deep underground, but he's basically talking about ways that they're weeding out the noise in general.
sees things in a completely different way. Another thing that needs to be underlined. In our research is that the 2 satellites that we used, which are Capella Space and Umbra Space, provide us with the data.
Simulation's reading my mind, guys, real time.
For free. Everyone can recover this data. Just go to the website of these 2 managers and download the data. So this research did not cost
Huh. So they use basically not crowdsourced, but
anything.
rather
I say this because compared to other
publicly available information.
methodologies, these other methodologies can be used to look inside the pyramids, such as the muonic methodology, that is, muons, which
I want to point out, guys, that one of the things I've actually mentioned over the last couple days after this popped out is basically how every government should be doing this if you have a pyramid in your possession, simply because it's non-invasive and just like ground penetrating radar, non-invasive, and compared to like a GDP of a country, even a small country, if you had a team of researchers that are actually able to do this, you might be sitting on a mountain of whatever the fuck this is. This is like Egypt, obviously at the forefront of ancient research, I guess you could say, ancient civilization, ancient research, because everyone knows about the pyramids. But there are a lot of pyramids around the world, and there's a lot of governments that basically either have no interest, maybe there's a little bit of corruption going on there, maybe no interest, no motivation, they don't want to spend money. But if researchers can do this without basically ever setting foot there or doing any, like on the cheap, this is a huge deal. Put aside whatever this even is in the first place, this is also a big deal in terms of research for basically ancient pyramids, which is what he's pointing out right now.
That the universe is full of irradiate the pyramids. If I put a camera with a photographic plate for muons under the pyramid, I can see how the photographic plate is impressed. A new camera costs €1,800,000.
He's talking about a camera
To take
itself
a
if he had
photograph,
specialized equipment.
it takes 8 months, and in this context, 1, 10, 12, 15 institutes, 1 university in the world, have dealt with this with a project that it's called Scampingham, which employs 30 people who work there and therefore a lot of time instead we did it from home without needing the camera that you have to keep in mind. It needs to be placed a photographic plate under the material, so you have to go there personally. The problem instead is that we solve it by looking at everything from above, making it become transparent as stone. A granite, and I repeat, it is more transparent than glass from this point of view substantially, while our research lasts a year, a few months substantially. The time to verify all the tens and tens of photographs taken by several satellites, the machine time necessary to make the accumulations transformed by Fourier. It is said like this: of all these things it is certainly not the money, the technology, the people that
I don't know what EHM
are
is.
necessary to discover a tenth of what we discover with this technology. So this is an innovative technology that allows you to
Somewhat unrelated to his project right now, he's basically just talking about the impact of what they did and basically how it's accessible to everyone else and how it's groundbreaking, which this is. The whole idea of what he's doing right now is pretty insane, even outside the scope of basically what they found, which is also arguably insane.
ancient monuments without going there, without moving a stone, therefore preserving this which is the good without altering its shape and structure.
So no impact to the structure itself, right?
There are at this point a whole series of problems, and we will see better tomorrow.
One day. Unless they're doing something today, which I kind of
follow
doubt.
a path as if everyone had participated in this research, and all piece for piece they had understood every type of stone of the thing that we have studied. You can see well the problem is, but then this research in this context at this moment, what does it produce as a partial result, because it is obviously not finished yet. The result is this: there are some things you see this research does not have to be proven. It is not that we have to wait for other types of work or other scientists who can declare it true because they are photographs and I photograph the Tower of Pisa, and it is not that I need 500 other people to photograph the Tower of Pisa to say there is a Tower of Pisa. So this research already as it is foresees.
So what he's saying right now is the information is publicly available so other scientists can verify. Peer review is very important, right? Verify and peer review. And he doesn't need to pass around basically the information itself because they already can find it in its way. This is kind of, obviously we're having to go through Italian to auto-generated subtitles and then pick through what he actually means, and there's going to be stuff lost in translation too. I think the YouTube's actually doing a pretty good job on this, by the way. It's obviously there's some flow issues here with the reading add-on. Maybe I could find a better reading add-on, but we aren't going to take time to do that. I think it does the job relatively decently, but yeah, he's basically saying that people can review this research because the research is already publicly available through the Capella satellites, if I'm understanding this properly.
That this data is real, but what does this mean? It means that someone built something at 1,200 meters depth. We want to believe that it was still the ancient Egyptians.
I mean, yeah, ancient Egyptians. Remember how we talked about tunnel boring machines at the beginning of the stream? That's stuff we use today to dig highways under the ground. They didn't have TBMs back then, and the understanding of building a how long is that? That's like 2 miles. Is that correct? 1,200 meters, not 1,200 kilometers. Mile underground. So actually a mile underground.
At 1,200 meters.
0.7 miles.
We want to believe that it was still the ancient Egyptians. Well, if we want to believe it, let's believe it with hail, but the problem is that these are the questions that we now have to answer. Tomorrow we will only show things as they are, and we will send home the people who come to this conference asking them to answer, them to make their hypotheses on what we have found, because what?
So he's saying tomorrow being, I believe, Monday, once again, work week wise, he's basically saying that, you know, the doubters are going to go home with their questions answered, is what he's inferring right now.
We have found, but who built it when they built it? For who built it? What was it? For these are answers that we will not give tomorrow, but that we will have to and will have the duty to give in the next meetings, in the next conferences. In the meantime, the need to carry on with this study is evident because.
So I think right now he's mentioning that further research needs to be done, and they can't answer what these are because obviously you need to basically dig it out, right? You need to tunnel into this. And once again, if I was a president of Egypt right now, I'd be getting some backhoes online. Obviously not backhoes, but the ability for us to tunnel underground is nothing that is that far-fetched. They could 100% do that, just even with normal mining techniques in a safe manner, and putting aside TBMs in a safe manner, and go under the pyramid without harming the pyramid. And I would be like, it's not like Egypt doesn't understand how to make tunnels. They can make tunnels if they want to. And yeah, I'd definitely, if I was a president, prime minister of Egypt right now, I'd be on the phone right now, because, yeah, like first figuring out whether or not this exists, which is what we're seeing right now, is he's basically giving us the information so that you can figure it out yourself, which is the Capella space program. And possibly they use an algorithm for it too. I haven't looked at the raw data. But these are like publicly available to everyone. And I believe their secret sauce is the algorithm mixed with AI that allowed them to basically weed out the noise so you can see further underground with stuff that we already have, right? And I guess AI would definitely be a big part of that. But basically he's saying that further research needs to be done, right? And they can't provide it. I think he said tomorrow as in not something they're going to introduce, but rather something that, you know, with excavation and is going to have to be done in the future.
History seems to me to have to be rewritten, and this will in fact be the program that we will set ourselves, because the Giza plane must be completely scanned to see exactly what is underneath and everything.
He's talking about actual scans
That
now.
now appears as bright spots will
The lime-colored stuff.
soon have a more precise shape, and at that point it will be necessary that whoever is responsible somehow becomes aware of the fact that it is time to go and see by digging what is underneath. Then, as far as we know, these natural cavities would have very precise shapes and tomographies that show a geometry that totally excludes the possibility that these are of a natural nature. Keep in mind, for example,
Prosaic.
these wells have this kind of, let's call it in inverted commas, a spiral staircase that winds up to these wells, and the luminosity of this luminous path has the characteristic of having been reconstructed on the computer, and it is not always the same brightness, because the boy considers these wrists as if they were made of glass. That is, he sees both the front and the back, and when this luminous thing turns around and turns the other way, its EHM luminous frequency, that is, its vibration, changes and changes with 3 degrees of different brightness, making us.
I think he's talking about right now photographing it from multiple angles and basically cross-referencing the images to figure out that they are staircases or tubes or something along those.
Understand a fundamental thing, that these wells are actually tubes. That is, inside there is a void, and they are all the same, and it will be very unlikely that it is something that was made by nature. It
Yeah, no shit.
is clear that at this point the need
One might have been questionable, guys. One might have been questionable. 8 kind of symmetrically laid out is not. That's not natural. So he's basically asserting that this isn't naturally made because, well, it's not.
to go and see for yourself, therefore to move some stones is fundamental, because only by looking inside will we discover what is inside. It is like opening an Easter man. We have discovered the Easter egg. Let's go and see the surprise, but we know
Well,
that there
Saint
is
Nick,
already
opening
a
your presents.
surprise. As you can see, I will show you the 3D construction again. You can understand exactly how the 3D model EHM reconstructs exactly what we see from a tomography. Tomorrow I will show you 10 tomographies from 10 different points of view where these wells are
Once again, I believe this is
clearly
Monday.
seen in all their essence. Think that these wells, essentially EHM, have EHM apparent diameter 10 to 12 m and a depth of at least 648 meters. One thing of work is that some of these structures serve to support the pyramid, because we have done static calculations and we have seen that the pyramid Kaffa weighs a lot, and to hold it up you need a base, and because otherwise it goes down into the sand, it goes down. The calculations show that substantially in better of years these structures have gone down more or less half a meter. The builders have evidently foreseen that you can't build a pyramid on the sand and then underneath it is necessary to build pillars that somehow reach the granite at the bottom and that support a plate that tomorrow we will show exists, that supports on which the pyramid was built. FA question please here, but if they built, if there are
So,
Structures 1,200 meters underground here, if I remember.
so he's suggesting that it's possibly piles, is what he's suggesting, right? But piles being hollow is not really the way piles work to support basically the weight of the pyramid. I'd actually be more questionable on whether or not, if they are, like, if these tubes are going down that far, they have to be made structurally sound enough where they support the pyramid on top of it. You aren't going to build a hollow structure as support. That's not really the way that works, right? So the tubes themselves have to be structurally sound enough in which they don't compromise the pyramid, which is sitting on top of it, which means they're extremely strong, right?
Correctly, 12,000 years ago, the water was lower than 120 meters, which is 3, so we are still in another historical era because we are 1 kilometer below. Basically, yes, in fact, who says that the pyramids were built 2,500 years before Christ? This is a question mark. That is becoming more and more, this hypothesis is becoming more and more not credible. This allows us to be able to say and to be able to make a certain number of.
He's stating that the idea that these were built 2,500 years ago is no longer completely credible, and that might be correct as well. As to when they were built, that is, yeah, there's a lot going on here, because a lot of it, like, remember how we talked about, basically the idea of how the pyramids were built is kind of not well understood, but we basically made up as humans, or the current times, we made up our own kind of hypothesis of how they're built with levers and pulleys and the wood things you put it on, which have a name. You know, you can push it on a piece of wood, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot lighter. And then with the new kind of information is that they possibly used hydraulic lifts, so water, compressing water to basically lift up boulders or blocks, right? And a lot of this is kind of not really headcanon, but it's a lot of stuff where we came up with our own kind of assumption through various different ideas and understanding what happens at the time, onto whether or not, you know, this is where things are, you know, it's kind of how we pictured things happening, right? And there isn't really, we don't have anything else to go on. But there's not really much in a way to figure this out. It's not really, yeah. And they're calling into question basically the idea that the pyramids are 25 years BC, so before Christ, or before 0, right?
Banal observations. Then if the first ones had actually been built as they say, we must remember that 4500-2600 years ago, 2500 also for Christ. Substantially, and the ancient Egyptians did not have the wheel, they did not have to write, they did not know how to write, they did not have the lever, they did not know how to cut the stone And how would they have managed to build something that goes down to 1,200 meters underground?
They're suggesting they didn't have the technology to do this in the first
all the
place.
fuss of the Giza plain how did they manage to move the stones that each of these stones of the Pyramid of Teo is taken 70 tons There is someone who says no, but it is enough to put more men instead. If 10 men do not pass, I will put 20, and we should make these people understand that putting 20 men around a stone that is 3 meters long, perhaps it's not easy, but we should make these people understand that they have to understand, and this is the most difficult thing. The last 3 years of pandemic have made us understand, for example, that it is not such a simple thing, so we must necessarily start thinking that it was the real plain of Giza. It did not see the light 4,500 years ago, but much earlier. I wanted to ask, and what led you to believe that these underground structures?
So, he's suggesting that it's maybe 4,500 years before Christ, 4,500 years before Christ, 4,500 years before Christ. Now he's getting asked a question, I guess?
Correspond to the halls of Aventus, and if you have.
So, if you looked at the original press release a couple days ago, we covered 2 days ago, and I uploaded it, highlighted it. We covered by the lady, and she talked about the potential, what it is. And this is where they're basically correlating, I don't know if it's necessarily a conspiracy theory, but I don't even know if it's from hieroglyphs, but basically mythology from the time that was mentioned, but no one actually found and potentially found. There's a lot of really weird stuff that just happened, that became conspiracy theories, right? Because you can't prove any of this. So they're basically correlating the conspiracy theories. One is the ancient library, Halls of Ventus. So basically, there's a library down there, equivalent of the Great Library of Alexandria, right? That burned to the ground. So the potential that there's actually a huge repository of knowledge down there, which has been mentioned in mythology or hieroglyphs. I'm not sure if it's hieroglyphs or where it came from specifically, but basically in mythology, more or less.
Considered the hypothesis that all this stuff is a big something that has to do with chemical reactions or with the possibility of extracting and materials from the subsoil and industrial complex.
I think he's going to suggest that it's an energy generation source. So this is where we're starting to get to the point where it's not tinfoil hat as much as they're theorizing what it potentially could have been used for in the first place. And I think he's going at the battery angle right now, or electricity generation angle.
Yes, I can answer if you want, of course, AI. Idea from an observation. The history is historicist, that is, who writes the history books is always someone who suits him to give an idea of what he wants to make people think that. History is the myth, is not historicist. The myth represents the reality of the facts. In a single frame in the myth, the past, the present, and the future are written in that instant. The myth must be taken in consideration. It must be re-evaluated, and in the myth it is written there are somewhere some rooms.
So I'm going to kind of like we're gonna pull this apart a little bit. He's basically talking about what I just mentioned, which is you have to keep an open mind, and he's comparing what we've learned or what they know through mythology. So mythology isn't always just tinfoil hat shit. Sometimes, like the Bible is an actual document that existed. It could have been changed over thousands of years for sure, right? It could be changed and reinterpreted over and over and over again, but there's still nuggets of truth that are left in the mythology or in whatever, religion that it came from, right? And theology, so the study of religion, not specifically Christianity, but the study of all religions in a scientific context, there's a lot, there's actually people that existed. Whether or not they did the things that they're talked about in the books, they can't really prove it, but they existed and they're written about, right? So you have to parse through knowledge over time, or religions over time, or mythology, or hieroglyphs, or, we can come up like our current day Bible is probably, just as a representation, the current day Bible is probably not the same thing that was written 2,000 years ago, right? It's probably seen a lot of different iterations over time, but there's still things in it that are somewhat original, and you can still look for nuggets of truth basically buried inside what is now mythology, and you could potentially use them. He's talking about potentially using them as a source of idea of what these things might be in the first place. So these aren't hollow screws supports them. I mean, we talked about this earlier. They aren't piles. They can't be piles. Piles aren't hollow. If you know anything, I'm not an expert on skyscraper building. Piles are legitimately giant a bunch of rods. So steel rods that are basically, they go down hundreds of feet into the ground, and it's filled with concrete. These are hollow. It's the opposite of what a pile would be. In order for these things to exist, not only did they have to have a purpose outside of existing, but then at the same time, they'd have to be structurally reinforced so they don't actually reduce the integrity of the pyramid. Because if you build on flat ground, right, on top of granite, it is going to be more structurally sound than building on top of hollow tubes. Yeah. So the whole idea that they're piles is just, they'd have to make piles for the hollow tubes, or just have a way of reinforcing these hollow tubes so they don't cave in, which is a structural marvel in and of itself. He suggested already that maybe we don't actually know the timeline of the pyramids themselves, which actually raises even more questions, right? Is what built these? I don't know. The first thing we talked about, I didn't even think this video was going to be here, by the way, and apparently it was subscriber only earlier, and now it's not, which is why we're covering this. I thought I was going to be playing Marvel Rivals tonight, and I'm not. But these tubes have been there for a long, long time. They go deep underground. Yeah, I don't. They're definitely. You don't build hollow tubes to support a skyscraper. Maybe you do, but we've gotten to the point where you can't really say this is, as they say, prosaic, right? There's just a normal explanation for it. And we talked about TBMs earlier, which is tunnel boring machines, which is what we use today to build highways underground, right? And that is an extremely... They didn't have TBMs back there. Spoilers, they didn't have TBMs, and TBMs don't go straight underground. The weird thing is, guys, by the way, is the similarities. We were just talking about TBMs. I was talking about basically... I watched this one as a fucking kid, which is crazy, and I still remember a lot of the points in the movie. Is not The Fifth Element. I remember that movie, too. What's the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Shit, we were just talking about it earlier. Total Recall. Yeah, Total Recall. Remember the giant TBM in Total Recall? There was a TBM in Total Recall, and they also had, they didn't really have giant tubes, but they literally had they had like the apocalypse device, right? They had literally just, they had a bunch of ice, that basically a glacier that they melted to release the oxygen in the glacier and basically make an atmosphere on Mars. There's a lot of really weird stuff, but yeah, they're empty. He talked about that earlier. There was no resonance with what was inside the tubes to begin with. They aren't empty, or excuse me, they are empty. So they don't they aren't harder material. They're actually softer or just empty themselves. So, yeah. But no, they aren't piles. Piles don't work that way.
Cold rooms of OK, which future are written. History is the myth is not historicist. The myth represents the reality of the facts.
Yeah, so once again, he's talking about how you can pull
myth,
nuggets of information from mythology, right?
Future are written in that instant.
And it's how it's been
must be
rewritten over
taken
time.
in consideration. It must be re-evaluated, and in the myth it is written there are somewhere.
And how we
some
should
rules.
go back and relook at
Cold
history
rooms of
or
OK,
relook at mythology as a potential source of information, even if it was discounted prior, right? So
contains some
you got
books
like
of some others.
auto translation is kind of muddling things here a little bit. In addition to the fact that there's also some localization, right? Like terms and idioms don't always translate properly.
Go further, we do not know this, but where there is smoke, there is always a bit of roast. This is the idea that made us think that these large...
Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So he's saying he's following basically the trail back and using it as kind of an inference to figure out where possibly fire is, right?
Structures were something that had to do with that stuff that is written in the book.
So he's stating
Then, at
once
this
again that
moment,
possibly...
we believe that these 8 wells that from...
He's stating that because, someone wrote about something in a book or in hieroglyphs, so where did they come up with the idea of that in the first place, right? Once again, Bible, as an example, has changed over countless years, but there's still things that they write about in it that, kind of, not transcends time, but rather, they came up with the idea in the first place, and it's something so outlandish that, just like building pyramids in the first place, right? Pyramids exist all over the world. It's not just in Egypt, but Egypt has the biggest ones and coolest ones, right? But there's a lot of different cultures that have pyramids. And they all kind of made them sort of around the same time period.
In questo istante noi riteniamo che questi 8 pozzi che dalle tomografie recenti
Recent tomographies we discovered to also be under the pyramid of Cheope, and that at the...
I mean, you wouldn't ever, if you were trying to extract clay from the ground, you wouldn't build them under the pyramid. Then, you'd have an open pit mine, right? These aren't reinforced with any, it's not, they aren't full of stuff. That's what he talked about at the beginning. You're going to have a different resonance. So if you scan, ultrasound, so if you scan an area with sound waves, the density is going to change, which they talked about at the beginning of the video. The density is going to change how they reflect off the object in it. And if they're full of shit, they aren't going to have the same sort of signature as something that basically is hollow. That they have been filled with, I don't know what's really undense. I mean, then if the way things work, guys, is putting aside modern metallurgy, right, in exotic materials like carbon nanotubes. Generally speaking, the denser a material is, generally more structurally sound it is, and then you start getting into metallurgy where you start mixing materials into it, right? But generally, it always kind of sides more and more towards metal and bronze and what did they have? Bronze, brass, and steel. I don't know when steel came around. In terms of ancient time, but basically they're heavy metals, right? not heavy metals as in toxic metals, but just metals in general. And that's a little bit different than stone. I don't know if you probably be very obvious on putting aside the complete ridiculousness of filling a giant fucking chamber with copper or whatever would be absolutely ludicrous. Highly doubtful that these are literally full of anything. Like I said, they covered this beginning. They're pretty confident that they're just basically empty. Should they, if they're piles, should they have stuff in them?
Because obviously we did.
Should they have stuff in them if they are piles? Yes, definitely. Like I said, piles have steel beams that go down inside of them, and then they're filled with concrete. So if they are piles, they would be structurally reinforced with the material inside of them, and they would not appear hollow.
Then at this moment we believe that these 8 wells that from recent tomographies we discovered to also be under the pyramid of Cheope, and that at the time of the analysis we had not seen because obviously we did not have the awareness, so we did not go to look with the right eye under the pyramid of Cheope. But now and tomorrow we will show you.
So he's talking about analyzing other pyramids and how they didn't do it in the past because they didn't know to look, or they didn't consider looking. Once again, if you have scientific biases, you don't consider stuff, right? Why would there be giant cylinders under the Great Pyramids? Good fucking question. Who would ever do something like that? Why would you even look there in the first place? And he talked about earlier in the video how he used AI and basically enhanced their algorithm to use the Capella shots to increase the resolution and lower the noise ratio on the data they had. Tomorrow, once again being Monday, I believe.
We realized that by doing a series of distant tomographies also under the other 2 dynamics, and it is right if these columns are needed to maintain the stability of these pyramids, they were also needed under the pyramid of Quinfu and under the pyramid of Ben-Khori by force of things, but not now. As now we are of the idea that not only they served to create the stability of these large monuments, but now at least 2 or maybe 3 other purposes that I won't tell you about for now because they would be based on little, but that clearly when we will have them.
So, by the way, it's good. I completely understand, guys, when I talk about conspiracy theory stuff. That's why I say tinfoil hat, right? Because tinfoil hat isn't necessarily that it has to be wrong, but rather when you go outside the crowd consensus, right, of what people think is correct and normal scientific experiments, what's currently approved, you start reaching these dots out here, conspiracy theory stuff. Doesn't mean it's completely wrong. No. Do we have anything to prove it? Not really. So basically, he also knows that some of this is tinfoil hat stuff, right? Like, maybe this isn't completely correct, which is probably, maybe it's not Egyptians that built this. But right now he's talking about prosaic explanations or the possibility that they're used for piles, right? The word is piles. They're being used as piles, but piles, once again, are not hollow. And building, I mean, it would just completely reject everything we know about building stuff. But I guess maybe there might be a way of building a pile in which it actually functions as a pile while being hollow. I guess I don't know how skyscrapers are made. Maybe there's a way of doing that, but yeah.
Opportunity to understand better or to go.
But basically, he's saying that he has a couple other ideas that what they might be, such as a battery, which is one of the conspiracy theories that the pyramids were used for generating power. The pyramids were used as a death ray. There's some wild conspiracy theories about what the pyramids actually were. But right now, he's going off of what they were able to see themselves, right? So he's saying tinfoil hat himself that he has some other ideas, but he's not going to talk about them. Because, once again, scientists, this is one of the reasons that UAPs and NHAs are looked down upon in the scientific community. There are stigmas, just like the Earth being flat, and you're the one guy that says it's round, and they go, ha ha, you're an idiot, right? That's what they do. Because that's not the consensus in the hive mind. That's not the consensus, not what everyone thinks. But also at the same time, we have to understand that, maybe our perception of what's going on and everything around us is a little bit different than what we like to believe, and something that, like pulleys and levers and little, pieces of wood to push the boulders around on, and maybe they briefly understood hydraulics using water. But then there's also some things that don't really match up with reality, and we are... This, guys, one of the reasons we cover this, I mean, there's a lot of really weird shit going on this year. NHIs, UAPs, JFK, Epstein, the F-47 now, psionics, and the potential, not just psionics, guys, so psychic, not just the idea of psionics, but also, and by the way, watch the telepathy tapes, but also, based on the Canadian research from January last year, is the potential that we actually are all capable of psionics. It's just part of our brain is actually preventing us from using them. Which, let's segue in tinfoil hat here for more, guys. From a Darwinism standpoint, a survival of the fittest, if you have the ability to read minds, to use thought without speaking, to move objects with your mind, to change or read the future, that's a pretty big evolutionary advantage, right? So it's actually really weird. It is really weird if all of a sudden part of our brain stops us from this functioning, right? It doesn't make sense unless there's some great war way back, and maybe there was, way back in the day, there's really no way for psionics to actually be not part of us, as it turns out, to be turned off, which then questions how it was turned off, right? And once again, there's the Canadian research paper we looked at 2 days ago, I believe. There's a lot of stuff we covered 2 days ago. It's the corona vaccine chips, maybe. I mean, then we would have had psionic powers before the coronavirus, but I guess. But yeah, the Canadian, it's a Canadian, I don't remember the university, but basically they did a study and they found out when they with RTMS, it's called RTMS, they basically created a lesion, I think on the front left lobe. They created a lesion, a temporary lesion, and it caused people to be able to accurately predict RNG, like random number generators, and move cursors around. I'm not making this shit up. There's a lot of really weird shit going on right now, guys. And the reason we're covering this right now is because this is probably one of the weirdest things, putting aside the F-47, which looks like it's a reverse-engineered UAP. I can't even believe I'm saying some of this shit. This is one of the weirdest things to come out, because what the fuck are these things? Like I said, piles? Let's just Google piles real quick here, just for reference. You guys know what I'm talking about. Skyscraper. You guys can't see my Google history. Pile. These are piles. These are how piles function. If they basically are giant rods, these are all filled with and it does, it's the same shape, but that's not what they do. These are giant cylinders with steel beams that go down the entire width, steel beams that go down the entire width of it, and then they're filled with concrete to the top. They structurally support, basically, a skyscraper and prevent it from moving at all. They aren't hollow. They're in no way, shape, or form hollow. They're basically one of the most structurally sound things we can build, because it basically forms the foundation of a structurally sound building, right? These are hollow tubes. You don't build your skyscraper on straws. That's not the way. This is like the hilarity of this is you don't build your skyscraper on straws, right? That's not how things work. But it's here, right? This is the end result. It's here, and that's the really weird thing about this is there is a gigantic pyramid on what appears to be straws. Anyways, back to the video. There's a lot of really weird... Did I mention there's a lot of really weird shit going on this year? 2025 is probably one of the most putting aside all the political shit, guys, if you are imbued right now and you are obsessed with politics right now, there is so much weird shit going on that has absolutely nothing... Well, maybe a little bit to do with politics. Almost nothing to do with politics, like I just mentioned earlier. And there's a lot of really just weird stuff going on. Politics is the least interesting thing. There's fucking pyramids on straws now. What do you want? You put aside people like setting fire to Teslas. There's a lot of just random shit. Hollow screw piles do exist. Oh, now we gotta look. I've never heard of that before. Hollow piles. Let's take a look. Hollow steel tubes. Creating a hollow pile has advantages of concrete saving, but there are also other advantages. These aren't for skyscrapers, though. What are hollow piles used for? Particularly in situations where solid piles are not feasible or efficient. Useless concrete. They're just basically shittier piles. But they're also made of steel. And they don't appear to be used in skyscrapers. The pyramid, by the way, I just want to point out, just as a rebuttal here, the pyramids are built on granite, or excuse me, basically the bedrock. Yeah, they're built on bedrock, so there's really no reason for them to actually use piles in the first place. But putting that aside, I guess there's hollow piles. Making a so the piles themselves, guys, are big. They are not. Once again, these tubes go down almost a mile underground. Piles themselves don't even do that, within reason, and they also aren't hollow. Like, if you're making it hollow, I'm very certain it wouldn't actually make it more structurally sound, or not hollow, if you made them bigger. I guess there's a potential that they could be hollow piles, but they'd have to figure out how to make concrete or steel. Once again, they're still hollow, mind you. And then, for some reason, see the reason to build piles when they're already basically building it on bedrock. And understanding and knowing how to build piles and what they mean in the first place. Which, there's no way ancient Egyptians knew how fucking piles worked. Piles are relatively new. Actually, maybe they aren't. Maybe there's some ancient civilization. When were piles built? Developed? 45 to 65 years ago. Oh, no, that's hemorrhoids. We're not talking about hemorrhoids. When were piles for structural reinforcement developed? Oh, maybe not. 6,000 years ago in Switzerland. Okay. No, I guess I'm wrong on that. So, first, definitely learn today that there are hollow piles. Once again, made out of steel or concrete. How has it been proven that the pyramids are not in fact obelisks? The Giza pyramids were built directly on bedrock to make sure they had a firm foundation. So maybe, I mean, this is still, by the way, they'd have to dig down basically close to a mile underground to build a pile without the whole thing caving in. I guess they're digging straight down into bedrock? Proven that the pyramids are not in fact obelisks. That's a tinfoil hat theory, by the way, from 2024 24, 23. Well, no, actually, it's probably been around a lot longer than that, but it's a meme at this point. I guess there are hollow piles. I don't know enough about piles and skyscraper construction to know whether or not having basically a 100-foot wide pile drilled into the ground is actually going to help your skyscraper that's hollow. Either way, they're hollow. Which, in my personal opinion, from... Actually, let's take a look here. When were hollow piles developed? 19th century. Helical pile was discovered in 1836. So this is different. The idea that you basically... So, piles themselves being apparently really old, at 6,000 years old in Switzerland, putting something into the ground is different than the idea that you can make something empty in the ground, and it still serves... Like, that wouldn't even occur to me, and it didn't occur to me. But apparently you can do that. You can put it into the ground, and it could function as a pile. But once again, the size is wrong. Also, the conception is wrong in terms of basically when they had it. Maybe they did develop it way back in the day, but then they also lost it over time, I guess. But according to Google's, 1800s is when hollow piles were developed, which isn't really straightforward, right? You wouldn't think that it would have the same structural integrity as a normal pile, which it doesn't, but it's also an alternative to normal piles. Screw piles, yeah. Yeah, so you're talking 1800s compared to normal piles, which are, I guess there's multiple sources here showing 6,000 years ago. So, very different. Is it possible? Yeah, is it likely? No. I mean, I want to say that's like aliens built the pyramid sort of thing, as terms of how possible it might be, but also, like, you'd have to have a structural engineer take a look at that in terms of figuring out... Did I close my video? Oh, I didn't. Okay. You'd have to have a structural engineer look at it. These are clearly a lot bigger than normal piles, so... hollow... So, not only did they not have the... from what we know, they didn't have hollow piles back then, but then they'd also have to understand that bedrock isn't stable, which bedrock is extremely stable, and then they'd have to have the technology to do it in the first place, and then somehow to make it without it being hollow, so concrete or steel, right? Which seems like, if you're going to build this, why wouldn't they just choose to fill it with something that might be really, really hard at the time, right? So maybe metal. Like, if you really wanted to make a pile that's a solid, you'd make it out of metal, right? What did they have? Did they have copper? What metallurgy weapons did Egyptians have? Bronze. So maybe fill it with bronze. That's a lot. I mean, I guess the pyramids are huge, so filling a shitload of piles with bronze, but once again, they'd be different, right? And these are, if they are piles, they'd be hollow. And maybe they'd have to screw the pile into the... If it's a screw pile, they'd have to screw the fucking pile into the ground. So probably not a screw pile. Also, the walkways on the side, regardless of it looking like a screw, these walkways on the side, they said, are hollow. So the walkway itself would also have to be hollow. So you're talking about a gigantic screw pile that basically, it looked like a screw, but is also completely hollow. That gets weirder and weirder. Is it possible? Maybe, but the center would be hollow, and I don't think these would just be like axis ways on the side. There's no way that they'd be able to and there'd be no way that they could actually make a giant screw pile and then screw the pile into the ground. Like, build a pile on the ground, maybe. Screwing it, like, what the fuck would they be using? A giant screwdriver to build a giant pile, screw a pile into the ground? Unlikely. And then if they had to screw it into the ground, the materials that they'd have to use would be insane, right? What are screw piles made out of? Galvanized steel. What are hollow? High strength steel. And they also don't look like that, by the way. The name of a screw pile is not what they actually are. So, if you look at it right here, basically the screw pile just infers that there's a screw at the bottom that screws it into the ground. It's not a giant screw. Hollow? Hollow tubular sections. So, not a screw pile. Could it be a hollow pile? Maybe. Very highly unlikely, considering the technology wasn't around back then, and that they'd have to make it out of something being concrete or steel. Also, highly unlikely. It could potentially have been a pile if it wasn't hollow, but it is hollow. The idea that it is a hollow pile, very unlikely, and then the technology was lost, very unlikely. And then there was like the whole idea that they'd have to consider using the pile in the first place, despite the fact that they're already building the pyramids on the bedrock, right? So I don't really think so, but considering the other option here is that something completely outside of Egyptians built it in the first place, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's up there with that, so there's that, I guess. I kind of doubt it. It's not a screw pile, but it might be a hollow pile. With lost technology and lost metallurgy and lost... Now with the masonry, making concrete. Concrete's relatively new. Right? You know, Rome had concrete, didn't it? When was concrete developed? Yeah, Rome had concrete. 6500 BC, so a long time ago. So it could potentially be a concrete hollow pile that they managed to dig a mile under the ground without the whole thing just literally collapsing on itself. I mean, it's up there, guys. It is up there as a possibility along with aliens. So I guess there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through for that to actually be an explanation for it, but there is potential there. And like once again, they'd have to understand that bedrock is not super. I mean, the bedrock is really stable. Like they'd have to understand that they want there to be a hollow pile there, I guess.
Served.
Okay,
Create the
moving on.
stability of the
Moving on.
To maintain the stability of these pyramids, they were also needed under the Pyramid of Khufu and under the Pyramid of Menkori by force of things, but not now.
They're discussing it being
As
a
now
pile
we are
again.
of the idea that not only they served to create the stability.
Okay,
of
let's go
these
back further. I literally segued for like a
under
half
the
an hour
other
there.
two dynamics, and it is right if these right eye under the Pyramid of Geope, but now and tomorrow we will show you.
Monday.
We realized that by doing a series of distant tomographies also under the other two dynamics, and it is right if these columns are needed to maintain the stability of these pyramids.
they
were
looked under
also
the other
needed under
pyramids?
the Pyramid of Khufu and under the Pyramid of Menkori by force of things, but not now. As now we are of the idea that not only they served to create the stability of these large monuments, but now at least two or maybe three other purposes that I won't tell you about for now, because they
Tinfoil hat.
would be based on little, but that clearly when we will have the
Yeah,
opportunity
we're
to
already
understand
considering weird shit
better
here,
or
guys.
to go and see this stuff in person, then maybe we will understand that back then there was a technology that we don't have yet. Our idea
We literally just talked about this.
is substantially linked to the fact that whoever they were had a strong awareness and consciousness of what the physics of phonons is and not of photons, that is of the electromagnetic field. We are fixated on photons, on light. Maxwell, these people, in my modest point of view, knew how to work on vibrations so much so that in the first works, that is in the work published on remote sensing, we say this by attributing to the structure of the Pyramid of Cheope the functioning of an infrasonic machine that moving with the wind produced through those structures. AZ, you have seen him here, 5 placed practically in series in parallel, produced a certain vibration that cured the pharaoh or whoever for Him and also here not only in the Egyptian myth, but in the ancient myths of all parts of the world it is written how the ancients used sound to heal.
So,
Clearly, if we want to consider the myth a joke, then.
So he's talking about them using sound as a healing device. So once again, mythology and pulling hypotheses from the mythology of what these were used for. So possibly a chamber that vibrates at a certain frequency to help with healing, which also, by the way, would be groundbreaking. I want to point out, guys, when I was a kid, I watched Stargate growing up, and still love the series. There's a lot of really good series in the early O's. Prior to our current generation, early O's, early 10s. Stargate, not really super amazing, but was a solid B-grade sci-fi show. It ran for like close to, actually maybe more than a decade. It ran a really long time, and then Atlantis too. It's kind of weird how a lot of these things are kind of weirdly matching up. If you remember Stargate, they had a healing sarcophagus in it that literally brought people back to life. Yeah. Which is also probably, once again, pulled from mythology that turned into sci-fi that we were finding out may actually not be sci-fi.
We can do it, but in front of the calculations that we have done, and we have seen that perhaps there are some numbers that have a particular precision people think that the ancient Egyptians did not know.
That's one of the theories.
The Pythagorean theorem, was not only known by the...
So one of the reasons that people think that the Egyptians did not build the pyramids is because the technology used for it is not something that would be ancient civilizations would not have access to, like pi, for instance, or modern geometry. Like they didn't have access to it, so even figuring it out in the first place was just a complete, and it doesn't make sense, right? This is where you start getting into tinfoil hat crowd, because, I mean, obviously something was made, and we just go off of what we can figure out, right? And there's nothing else to go off of. It doesn't matter if you think it's wrong or not, because at the end of the day, we don't have anything else observable that we can potentially use. We just know that they built them, right? Or someone built them, and they're there, and it's most likely the Egyptians, because the other explanation being aliens or ancient civilizations, like there's nothing left of them. There's no observables, right? Nothing that we can actually go and, maybe this is why it turned out this way. But, he's explaining why they understood advanced math, I believe.
We can do it, but in front of the calculations that we have done, and clearly if we want to consider the myth the joke, then we can do it, but in front of the calculations that we have done, and we have seen that perhaps there are some numbers that have a particular precision people think that the ancient Egyptians did not know. The Pythagorean theorem was not only known by the ancient Egyptians, but they built a pyramid with it, because if you do not know the Pythagorean theorem, the pyramid cannot be built because it turns out really badly, and when one goes to do the right calculations, those glasses discover that the pyramid of Kaffa, like the pyramid of Glunkufu, are built not only on the 31.9 and not on the 3.16, as someone says, an approximation of the Termitoro, but also on.
He's talking about, I believe, the geological coordinates which is built, which is basically pi, I believe. So the longitudinal longitudinal axis. Linked to the mathematical constant pi through the relationship between the perimeter and the base of the height of the pyramid. And some suggesting the builders intentionally incorporated pi into the design. Where is the... GPS coordinates of the Great Pyramid encode pi into it. Which means you'd have to understand its relationship in terms of the planet, which is also pretty insane. But that could also just be a coincidence. But that is one of the conspiracy tinfoil hat, one of the conspiracy theories going around as to why the Egyptians didn't build the pyramids, and it was someone else, or someone told them where to build.
Ancient Egyptians, but they built a pyramid with it, because if you do not know the Pythagorean theorem, the pyramid cannot be built because it turns out really badly, and when one goes to do the right calculations, those glasses discover that the pyramid of Kaffa, like the pyramid of Glunkufu, are built not only on the 31.9 and not on the 3.16, as someone says, an approximation of the Termitoro, but also on the 16180339, which is the sectioner in a precise way. This basically means that the mathematics of the ancient builders of these monuments provided for a series of awareness and consciousness that we today believe that the ancient Egyptians did not have, and that instead it seems they did. Not that is they did, they had. I can continue. I ask this because some of the internal structures and the pyramids resemble so much to reactors to reaction rooms. And
so this, I believe, is the same guy from earlier that was asking him whether or not, essentially he's asking if they're a giant battery or energy generation, right?
Not just to something that was used on a human level, that is for people. The idea that I got while inside was that maybe something that was used for a fluid to I don't know, but not so much to create a. Well, then the important thing is to make hypotheses, because scientific research must be approached by making hypotheses, because if you don't make hypotheses, you don't know what to look for. No, then the hypotheses must be validated and from measurements. So right now we are not able to say what.
Yeah, so they moved past basically talking about, well, the research for today, and they mentioned tomorrow, which I believe once again is Monday, or it's later today, Saturday, because this is from Friday. He's basically mentioning right now that, you know, they're making a hypothesis right now, but there's no way to know until basically, you know, Egypt decides to bore into this, which, I mean, if I was the fucking president of Egypt once again, I'd be like, hey, bros, what would it take for us to build a tunnel and just see what's inside these potential hollow piles, these potential hollow cylinders under the pyramids, right? And they don't really know until they figured it out.
This whole structure is for unless by making hypotheses, but we are able to say with absolute certainty that these structures are there and that they are not random, and that
that's a big part of what's
someone therefore put them there. From there, then we can start to do all that.
So as we mentioned earlier, so one of the things that we've been trying to assert, and as someone even mentioned at the beginning of the stream today, was, is it even real, right? So these guys are real scientists. This is a real organization. It might be a small one, but these guys are actually doing this. And they are very confident in their findings and what is there. And they obviously, their online presence, guys, was very, very much botched. So much so that a lot of people reporting on this literally are either parroting sometimes wrong information or not the right information or not all the information. And this is, by the way, I haven't seen this online anywhere. This is why the real reason we're watching this is because this is new to me. This was paywalled up until, I guess, a couple hours ago. This was paywalled up until a couple hours ago. Very interesting and presents a lot of context that a lot of people were missing out on, mainly on their technique that they use, which I guess is a little bit of a secret sauce because they aren't giving it to people. They're telling where they got the information from, which is the Capella space satellites, and how they basically use it together, but they aren't giving you the information of how they tune their algorithm to weed out all the noise, which they may or may not do. I think they said later in the year they're actually going to open it up to scientific inquiry, so people basically being able to look at their work. So part of the scientific community is allowing you to see, you know, your methodology, right? And if they hide it, then it also gives them an edge so they could sell it to a company. But at the same time, then they wouldn't be able to publish a paper on it. Really depends on what they're going with it. So, is it there? They basically told us where to find it, and they said there's going to be more data on Monday, but they didn't completely give like the algorithm what they're using to do this, right? So you might not be completely able to replicate it, but that's what people were looking for. These guys are here. They're saying that this is actually part of this. They literally use the Capella space satellites to, in part, figure this out, in addition to AI and their own developed algorithm to figure out what's down there and weed out all the noise and the stuff that's around it. So they're actually extremely confident it's there. They don't know what it is, but they're very confident it's there. So it already answers one of the questions. The other ones we aren't going to be able to figure out probably for maybe weeks or months is what they are, right?
This whole structure is for unless by making hypotheses, but we are able to say with absolute certainty that these structures are there and that they are not random and that someone therefore put them there from there, then we can start to do all the investigative measures we want, but that stuff is there and someone put it there. The scientific method is important because the scientific method is based on the repeatability of the experiment. So from my point of view, there is no alternative.
Let's just
because the scientific method
let's just pause here for a moment, guys. I think these are the other people on the Zoom call here. Why does it look like Joseph Stalin in the background here? And then this guy's face is missing. Illuminati? I mean, that's really... I think they weren't supposed to show this, but that's kind of curious right here, if you're looking at this guy right here. Okay.
On the repeatability of the experiment, so from my point of view, there is no alternative research. Or research, so there is no me of the research, there is no alternative research, this research from my point of view, so what we have applied is the least we have taken this one of different manufacture, that is they have built exactly two different factories, two different companies. We have processed the data of both one space and the other. The same things came out okay, and so this is as far as the measurement of the depth is concerned. Actually, I turn to Corrado that we have taken a bit of courage to provide the data of 1 kilometer. We have done the impossible. We have measured X. We have.
So right now they're talking about the accuracy of their measurements and why they didn't go below 1 kilometer, because they're basically saying that there's too much noise. I believe they said, from what we just read there, that they had two different companies verify their findings. So going through two different pieces of technology, so maybe two different AI models, to reach basically the same conclusion and compare them against each other. And I believe right now they're saying that basically they can't go below 1 kilometer because of basically noise, once again, which was a big problem with SAR in the first place, was going too deep, which is why a lot of people thought that it wasn't possible. But they also aren't bleeding-edge scientists basically doing new things. They're going off Grok, and Grok says it's not possible because Grok's going off a consensus, a weighted consensus of stuff that's already happened. AI models are great, guys. There's actually a weird disconnect where people think AI models know the future. AI is basically built on what we know right now, right? And can it help try to predict the future? Sure, but does it actually... Like, if you ask it if they can do that right now, it's going to say no, because according to normal research, or everything that we've had so far, they can't. Until someone goes and does it, and then all of a sudden you have new data points, right? But until it gets those data points, there's nothing. This is the beginning.
Measurement of the depth is concerned. Actually, I turn to Corrado that we have taken a bit of courage to provide the data of 1 kilometer. We have done the impossible. We have measured X. We have.
So he's saying basically that, you know, a certain amount of confidence is necessary here, which is why they needed courage to do it, right?
Measured changes, here changes, there ask the artificial intelligence. In case we have redone the calculations to the artificial intelligence which gave us the same results, and so I am there is no security.
So he verified basically his calculations against the AI model.
Scientist, I cannot say no, it is like that, and that's it because I am in a stump. But it is like that too. 99, that is there they would make some vertical ducts that descend to a...
Made a joke, guys, I didn't catch it.
In case we have redone the calculations to the artificial intelligence which gave us the same results, and so I am there is no security. That is as a scientist I cannot say no, it is like that, and that's it because I am in a stump. But
I think it's
like
joke.
That too. 99, that is there they would make some vertical ducts that descend to a depth of 1 kilometer and to 1.4 MH, we have to look carefully. The fortress is the one from kilometer 2 to kilometer 4 with one of the intermediate boxes further down. There are some large vanni that you can see. We measure them and...
He's talking about... So this is new, and I haven't seen this anywhere online. He's saying the structures go even deeper than 2 kilometers, and there's stuff further down, which I think arguably they're also saying they don't have accuracy to provide high confidence numbers on, which is why they aren't really completely showing that right now. There's stuff even further down, which, guys, this is getting really fucking weird. And once again, it's not really... Hollow piles is literally probably up there with the aliens building them in the first place. So the aliens might have put hollow piles in the ground at this point is where we're going with this. Because they go even deeper, which you wouldn't even need to do that. Let alone could the ancient Egyptians even do that in the first place? I don't think they fucking could. Yeah. Like... So he's saying stuff is even further down, but they don't have the confidence in the numbers to provide that basically for us right now. So they provided basically stuff 1 to 2 kilometers down, which is the piles, or excuse me, the hollow tubes. I stopped calling them piles. The hollow tubes with the cubes underneath, the 80-kilometer cubes underneath them, 80-meter cubes. 80 meters, guys, if you're curious, you're American, 80 meters cube is 2/3 of a football field. Just as an idea of reference of how big this is, those cubes underneath these piles are also hollow, which wouldn't make sense in terms of a pile because you don't put cubes under a pile, which makes it even... So, like, you know, going back to our explanation of it possibly being a hollow pile, you don't put empty cubes under a pile. That would make absolutely no fucking sense. So, even less likely that they're actually piles in the first place, because what is a fucking cube doing under there in the first place? These cubes are gigantic. 2/3 of a football field is huge, cubed. 80-meter... cube underneath the piles, or god damn it, underneath the hollow tubes is the 80-meter box, as they showed earlier in the footage, right? These guys right there. So highly unlikely that these are piles. I completely forgot when we were talking about because I didn't even know about hollow piles, to be perfectly honest. When we're talking about this, yeah, there's boxes underneath it too. So hollow boxes makes it even less likely that these are piles.
99, that is that they would make some vertical ducts that descend to a depth of 1 kilometer and 1.4 mh. We have to look carefully. The fortress is the one from kilometer 2 to kilometer 4 with one of the intermediate boxes further down. There are some large vanni that you can see. We measure them and...
Valley?
So this will be the future. As you have seen, there are many structures that present singularities at right angles, so...
He's mentioning right now that there's stuff further down, they can't figure it out, so tomorrow being maybe in the future, as opposed to Monday, where they're talking about basically discussing these further and further research, and how some of these other anomalies on the Giza Plateau overview that we saw earlier, how some of these stand out, and they have... stuff that you generally don't find in nature, including right angles, so most likely actually built, right? Is there stuff in nature that actually makes right angles? Yes. And geometric shapes? Yes. It's incredibly rare. It doesn't just happen under fucking... under pyramids out of nowhere, so, yeah.
The boxes are visible. And nature is very good. Nature is very good at generating natural cavities.
But not right angle
the
ones.
The fact of the net angle seems to me to be something that is done by, could be done by someone else, that is by people. In short, they start to calculate in one height and perfume. So on this I forgot the S. If what you see, the tomography, is all the...
By the way...
same material, because it seems that it is the same then to do this eye.
So he's talking about what the sides of the material are the sides of the structures are made out of, the same material. By the way, guys, if these guys are listening, it doesn't take much to hire someone to make actual translations down here that are accurate. So they don't even need to hire like someone to dub over this as much as just having accurate translations, because some of this is getting lost in translation too.
Cannot answer you, because to do this you need to do the so-called done by, could be done by someone else, that is by people. In short, they start to calculate in 1 height and perfume. So on this. I forgot the S if what you see the tomography is all the same material because it seems that it is the same then to do this I cannot answer you because to do this you need to do the so-called economic spheroscopy. You can do it months or I have to do tomographies at different frequencies, create a database, the so-called dictionary of frequencies to the variable of the material and then give you an answer like A. As you can see the seriousness of those who are here on the side, let's say, of those who do. The research is the one of where they cannot answer, underscore. I cannot tell you there is, however, in any case it is solid, however it is solid where it shines is under wave, where it shines a little less because there is the fake ground, the so-called contrast material. Maybe there is water, okay, the more it is less bright, or even there is darkness, no. So where there is something bright and above all this something bright. Sorry if I go on about this, but as you can see from the wells, the bright too.
He's talking about the contrast between different materials and the density of the material. I don't think he's wording it that way, but the density of the material determines basically the refraction or essentially the color hues. They translated to an acoustic model. So the color hues determine essentially the density of the material, which means that it have to, like, you aren't going to make piles out of what would be like a really light stone. Any sand? You aren't going to make sand piles. Maybe? Not, I don't think so. I don't even know how sand would show up then, like, because I think they weed it out as noise. So, like, would it even show up then? I don't know. Lava stone is really light, so some sort of stone with that's airy. Not bedrock, sandstone, maybe.
Reach the sun because we take the data from the conical spectroscopy. From the surface must be connected to the surface, otherwise you don't know. Why, if it is isolated, if there was vibration, it remains confined down, and we from above do not extract the information. No, this is important. Well, surely this. Research, the results we are obtaining are extremely important because they also give confirmation of a pre-existence of a city that lived on this planet in remote times. You know, that time ago. In short, I proposed a vision, let's say, of the dating of the Piana di Kiz.
This is one of the dynasties.
Also because of a series of documents that are considered of little interest, but that with the progress of this research also take on an increasingly marked value. I am referring, for example, to the word smerodine because this, to answer Thomas first, he asked a specific question about why Ameti, so I will also come to you on this question A, but also for.
So he's talking about basically cross-referencing old texts and pieces of mythology or things that people have talked about in the past that show little interest because there's nothing to go off of, right? Because there's an empty lead. But as it turns out, there's something quite a bit bigger going on there. So when they talked about earlier about explanations, and not one being, maybe it is a hollow pile that goes to an empty box, which wouldn't make sense at all. One of the things that they considered was the house momenti, because those are actually mentioned in pieces of text, and they're going off basically mythology that potentially could provide an answer, because there's nothing else. What else? You can make up your own explanations for it, but if we're actually looking at what's there, if we're theorizing right now, they're using what's available to them, which is pieces of text that were, kind of forgotten, I guess, or didn't really have a purpose, besides conspiracy theory.
Example, the chronology of the royal canon and the myths that are told in the Book of the Dead, in short. So there are a whole series of references that suggest a pre-existence that is a bit determined in 36,400, which is also in line. Let's Say with these documents AA, and so I want to say, this work that we are doing is absolutely relevant because it goes to establish a whole series of A conditions that until today seem to be, how to say in short, not very reliable A as
Conspiracy theory,
regards
tinfoil hat.
instead the consideration of the association of this discovery with the city of Amonti. Beyond what Professor Ma has perfectly specified, there are some elements that are emerging from the reconstruction of what we are identifying under the surface that seem to be consistent with some descriptions that we find in the moments before I was referring to the emerald
Cross-referencing the
tables,
books.
where there are precise references to these wells that go deep, that were built. In the verse, it speaks of the children of light. We do not know who they are, but the data remains objective of the presence of these wells that go.
So now they're getting a little bit... remember earlier how they said that they had some ideas of what they possibly are, but weren't going to share them because they don't really have any factual basis. This is what they're going off of. So if you have works, guys, through mythology, once again, if we talked about the Bible earlier, it's not that everything in it's correct, but there's bits and pieces in it that actually were things and events that happened. And it's entirely possible, so if they're talking about, you mentioned the Book of the Dead, having references to in it, if they actually find something that references what's actually there, obviously they're going to use it, right? Or they're going to use it as a key source of research, because clearly there's something going on here. And could they be hollow piles? Very likely not, but possibly hollow piles that are gigantic, that go to hollow boxes. But then the explanations that they got from the Egyptians themselves, or basically their Bible-ish sort of book, is potentially a library, right? Which is also one of the possibilities here.
Deep as well as the boxes that was spoken of before, that are described in these times as rooms with the size of space, so just to underline how enormous
2/3 of a football
these
field
rooms were. In addition, there is a further reference to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, in particular in chapter 149, where there is a description, let's say, of these rooms, not extremely precise. In fact, it speaks of 14 residences, but only some of these are discrete, that seem to assume, let's say, from the reconstruction of the precise connotations that leave us as if to say, hey, they give us a relative certainty that we are talking about some rooms. And my hypothesis, that however must be evaluated from a historical point of view, is that about 13,500 years ago, following a cataclysmic event of which we have almost all the reformations today, and that was then reproduced by scientific works.
So, this is the tinfoil hat moment, guys. I believe they're talking about Noah's flood. So, also in the Bible, and a lot of people think didn't even happen. This is also where the conspiracy theorists online are going cray-cray about this right now, is the potential that this is pre-flood or part of how they survived the flood. Yeah, there's a lot of really weird shit going on right now. So I believe they're talking about the Great Flood in the Bible, or Noah's Ark.
Ago, following a cataclysmic event of which we have almost all the reformations today, and that was then reproduced by scientific works. Measured so substantially 13,500 years ago, roughly, we have what we call inverse. That is, an object or more objects fell on our planet, also modifying the structure of the the Earth's axis. In that context, some scholars claim that the water of the Chiachi rose more than 100 meters in height, and we find traces of this because inside the pyramid of Cheope 2.5 of sea salt were found stuck to all the walls. Sea salt that was removed by the...
So he's talking about basically how they referenced a giant flood that happened back then. they're figuring it out because of basically where salt ended up on the walls inside of the pyramid itself. So obviously salt water has salt in it and it leaves behind a residue. It's also highly corrosive. It leaves behind a residue on everything, and they found basically salt up the sides of the walls, which insinuates that water level was at that height at some point.
Salerno è stato rimosso da troupe di Zacchiaio
Trupcia when he cleaned the pyramids.
le piramidi.
It
Salt
is
was removed
evident
by
that
Trupcia.
therefore the sea water entered the pyramids and then evaporated slowly, because otherwise 2 centimeters of crystallized salt that is not there I find. This makes me think that 13,500, 1,500 years ago, the pyramid, if it was already working, had stopped working because after it would have been unusable anyway, so the idea that I got is that this stuff was.
So right now he's talking about whatever purpose it had, it predates the gigantic flood that they had that then basically rendered it inoperable. You know, like sinking electronics and water, especially salt water, is going to destroy basically everything. So it's entirely possible that whatever it was destroyed by the flooding itself. Once again, if you guys didn't know, salt water is extremely corrosive. Put a piece of metal in it. It is extremely corrosive to basically everything that comes in contact with it, and it will legitimately dissolve almost everything. So there's a lot of things that could have actually came in contact with it that were dissolved by the salt water itself.
Used before
Over
the
a
universal
really long
after
period of
those
time.
who remained. They're the survivors, let's say a few hundred years later, returning to that place in Piritsa they restored as it is written.
So he's mentioning that whatever it was built before ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Egyptians came back and basically took over the pyramids. So he's asserting that the pyramids actually predate ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Egyptians basically took them over and then basically modified them into burial chambers. It's kind of what I think he's saying right now. So this is kind of a curious explanation, which is, I don't know, maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but he's basically insinuating that the ancient Egyptians just came back and made it their own kind of home thing, because it is a really cool spot for someone to be buried, right? Which is also, but it might not have been the original purpose of building it in the first place.
Somewhere the Pyramid of Cope, so they did not build it, but they restored it, and then, however, I do not know what they did with it, and what use they made of them certainly wasn't the use of those who built them. And spatial resolution is scientifically defined as the is a distance, and it is the minimum distance so that 2 objects can be distinguished separately. That is, I move away, I have 2 objects at a certain point, I see 2, then I don't see them anymore, I see 1. So lambda, what is the wavelength of the physical phenomenon that I use to investigate something, to have a photograph of it? Lambda, I have that length for a distance. So
I think he's talking about the mathematic model and how he determines basically the refraction of the material and how to look through it. I'm not a mathematician, and I also don't understand how SAR works, so this might be a technical explanation that someone that actually understands it would have to be able to decipher better.
Both in the numerators, this makes me understand that the more I increase the distance, and the more the resulting spatial resolution is integrated, the more I decrease lambda. Therefore, I increase the
speaking math
frequency
right now,
more
guys.
okay, the resolution increases.
Pretty sure he's talking about how he
2 times the
changed the
aperture.
noise.
Yeah, the aperture is fundamental. The aperture is. In the cameras, it is the aperture of the lens. That camera has a higher aperture than a cell phone, from which we can explain the synthetic aperture radar. From space, from 680 kilometers, to have a spatial resolution. For example, submetric on Earth, by doing the calculations you can easily do them at home. It turns out that you need to build An antenna, for example, with a length of 60 to 70 kilometers, i.e. a piece of iron in the space of 70 kilometers. And how do you do it? Having hypnotized this, let's say, city, this structure that humans can have water depth, build an antenna, for example, with a length of 60 to 70 kilometers, i.e. a piece of iron in the space of 70 kilometers. And how do you do it? Having hypnotized this, let's say, city, this structure that humans can have water depth and in those temperatures, with those temperatures or other grass sheet. Thanks for the question. In fact, we wanted to talk about this. Then I don't know if you want to answer no here, then if okay, then I don't remember how much the temperature increases for every meter that you go underground, so there is a trend certainly increasing in temperature, and that led us to measure to calculate a temperature certainly higher than what there is. However, there is one thing to take into consideration from the tomographies I saw them. Tomorrow maybe we can talk about it even more precisely. There are an enormous amount of air ducts without snails, because there are ducts with snails and ducts without snails that probably serve to ventilate the area below. And
he's talking about the extra corridors or paths, like the little paths going around the side, might be being used for air circulation, which you have to have air circulation, just like with modern mining further underground. So they might actually be used as a method of moving air around in these corridors underground, which is also an explanation for it that I didn't consider. Is there actually airways, which is also pretty incredible that Egyptians actually, well, I mean, that's kind of more intuitive, right? Because if people start dropping dead, and you figure out when they go far enough down, and they start getting hazy and CO2 poisoning, right? You'd probably be able to figure out why that's happening, to intuit that. But, yeah, so he's suggesting that some of these small corridors that you're seeing are actually being used, snails, are actually, obviously a translation error, are basically being used for air pathways or fresh air or CO2 removal, depending on how you want to look at it.
above, sir, below, and therefore try to maintain a temperature compatible with the leadership, taking into account that on then anyway the temperatures are high.
So he's saying the further underground you go, the hotter it gets too, which is 100% true. I think he's stating that not only would it be used for fresh air, but also would be used as a way of normalizing the temperature underground. Maybe so it's not freezing? So we're talking about HVAC. He's suggesting maybe HVAC, so heating and ventilation, right? So it's forced hot air? Or is it too cold or too hot? I don't know what... Does it get hot underground? How hot is it at 1,000 feet underground? At 1,000 feet underground, the temperature will generally increase by about 15 to 30 Celsius per kilometer. So it actually would be really fucking hot. So 15 to 30 degrees per 1,000 feet. Meaning it will be warmer than the surface temperature, but the exact temperature depends on the surface temperature and the geothermal gradient of the specific location. The general rule of thumb is that an increase of 12 to 15 degrees per 1,000 feet of depth. So it literally would be frying people underground. So essentially, this is the opposite. I thought it would be getting colder, because it does get colder when you go underground, but then it starts getting hotter when you go further and further underground. This is really deep, by the way. 1,000 feet being a little. How many kilometers is that? Like 3. Or, yeah, 3 km to miles. No, not 3. 2? Yeah, a little, like, maybe 1.8 kilometers below ground, and they talked about the structure going down 2 kilometers, and there's stuff even further below that. So, yeah, there's actually potential where it could be extremely hot. It could be extremely hot underground, because they're going really deep. And as such, he's actually insinuating that they had an HVAC system to make it cooler, assumedly making it cooler down there. Which is, that's insane. That's fucking insane. They actually, like, I mean, you'd be able to intuit that, right? In the first place, you'd be able to use intuition to figure that out because you're going down, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and it becomes a problem. Then you're like, hey, maybe if we move air, it gets colder, so that they could figure that out, right? That's not super far-fetched, but the fact that they're actually constructing this is like, God, guys, this is like literally like the Mines of Moria. This shit is insane. The whole idea of this is absolutely insane in the first place, and it's clearly there.
Snails that probably serve to ventilate the area below and above below, and therefore try to maintain a temperature compatible with the leadership taking into account that on then anyway the temperatures are high. Not yes, not as high as you can think. We made GA, we saw that basically 38 degrees at 6,700 meters distance, and the interesting thing is that these tubes that we first thought were colors instead are wind, are perforated they can serve as vertical piano exchanges. Because the exchanges are made like this, that is, there are two tubes, one inside, the other in one the hot air comes out, and in the other the cold air comes in, so it.
He's talking about them being used as heat exchangers, by the way. So exchanging basically the temperature differences between two different fluids or air. You can put a lot of things in heat exchangers.
Could be that these all served and to travel what is underneath, not by chance. In the ancient texts they talk about these deep wells that bring light and water from above, life from the other, this methodology that we have.
So I think we literally translated it in the books, guys, the Book of the Dead. We translated it as the corridor to hell or something along those lines. So when we were trying to figure it out, we're talking about the Book of the Dead because we thought it was a metaphor for the underworld, when in fact, and going to the underworld, when in fact they might have been talking about a system that allows them to go really deep underground, which is actually a really curious interpretation, to be perfectly honest.
Could be that these all served and to travel what is underneath, not by chance. In the ancient texts they talk about these deep wells that bring light and water from above, life from the other. This methodology that we have applied for these things actually has a mind-blowing potential, because it could be used to find water in the desert, it could be used to find oil in the desert, it could be used to find precious metals on the Runa, or some hole maybe not wanted, but if there is the Minasara project that has already in some way made data available, for example, for the moon, no, because not used, it could be useful to see, I don't know, the enemy's substitutables, in quotes, somewhere it could, in short. So we are beyond the banal hypothesis of looking inside a chin, it.
They're talking about basically explanations that aren't easily, provable, right? And they won't be able to until we actually enter them, or the Egyptian government chooses to excavate, which they 100% should. I mean, they could 100% build tunnels, guys, without actually disturbing the pyramids themselves, so I don't think that's really going to be a problem. The question is whether or not they do this right away, or whether or not they actually, care. This is the weird thing. So these guys are Italian, and this is obvious. I don't know if this is sanctioned by the Egyptian government at all. They're basically just using their own model and methodology while looking at basically satellites. I don't think they ever stated whether or not I assume they do, because they had a white paper from 22. And they mentioned that their further research needs to be done with actual better instrumentation than just using satellites, right? Which obviously is going to take a lot more time and effort. But, yeah. They're basically talking about stuff that is, what it potentially could be.
Is certainly a technology that will allow us in the future. It could, in short, so we are beyond the banal hypothesis of looking inside. A chin, it is certainly a technology that will allow us in the future, if
I don't know what
used
that is.
well, to live better from every point of view. Okay. The applications could be multiple, and it seems to me that a few days ago, 2 days ago, there was a restart of some activity in the Neapolitan area. Music. Here is an activity, an objective, in my opinion, which is poor, therefore to be donated to humanity, and that is certainly.
I think he's stating right now the Egyptians have already started moving on whatever this is after hearing about it, and now he's talking about basically it being used as a betterment of humanity as opposed to, oh God, guys, as opposed to it just being used by the Egyptian government. There's a lot going on here, guys. Like I mentioned before at the beginning of this, and before we even watched this video, I didn't even know this video was available and that it was actually something that we could look at. But when I mentioned this at the beginning, it would be absolutely hilarious if Egypt becomes the most technologically advanced nation on the planet, and that will most definitely lead to disclosure by other governments, because if you find out that your alien technology is actually not so, outside exotic, not so exotic, all of a sudden it becomes normal. Like we looked at the F-47 earlier today. You find out it's actually not that exotic, all of a sudden there becomes a, not rush, but rather it becomes pointless to hide it anymore. So I'm not going to lie. This is actually hilarious if this was a way for aliens to get us to disclose basically UAPs and NHIs, because it's a really good idea. If all of a sudden that we find all this weird stuff below Egypt, there is actually potential for, well, I wouldn't say instability, but rather at the same time it would definitely make leaps and bounds. And it's pretty clear at this point that we have reverse engineering programs. The F-47 literally looks like it's fucking basically like an alien craft. Yeah, I'm pretty sure at this point we're already seeing the fruits of the labor of programs that we don't have, like the public has no access to. But I think one of the reasons that the F-47 came to being is possibly, I mean, that happened after this happened, so I don't know. There's a lot of really weird coincidences, and we talked about earlier with the F-47 timeline, the new fighter jet from the U.S. We talked about the timelines, the timeline between the F-16, so 4th gen, and the 5th gen fighter, the F-22 or the F-35, was 30 years. From the F-22 to the F-47 was 20 years, and 18 years if you're talking about the F-35. But they also mentioned that they've been flying it for 5 years. So the F-47 has been something that they've had for 13 years after they developed, and that doesn't include planning, after they developed and basically started producing the F-35, which would be absolutely insane. That would absolutely be insane. And yeah, like this might actually, the F-35, or excuse me, the F-47 might be the beginning of disclosure as we're seeing it. Kind of tinfoil hat here, guys, but there's a lot of weird coincidences that are happening. And not only might just be disclosure of NHIs and UAPs, but it also might be this. This is once again one of the weirdest things, and it's within the timeline too. This conference was on the 15th, and this video was released yesterday, and also the press briefing on the F-47 from when the president announced it was also yesterday. So, like I said, we have a lot of really weird stuff happening this year. This isn't just like one or two things. You're like, oh, that's it. No, there's a lot of really weird stuff going on. And this might be part of it. And this isn't like the guy earlier was talking about being hollow piles. Piles don't go into boxes. So is it potentially be a hollow pile? I don't know structurally if you can make piles that big that would actually serve a purpose without it being filled with something. And they aren't filled with something. They're hollow. So there's a lot going on here, guys, and I don't think it's something the Egyptians could easily build. I don't think it is a prosaic explanation, as they say, or an ordinary explanation from Earth. And we're getting into some really interesting sci-fi. We're getting into the interesting sci-fi because I've been along forever, guys. Not alive forever, but I've been alive for a long time, and I've been waiting for sci-fi to happen. And then we got robots. Oh, I didn't even mention that, guys. There's also the robots. Did you see the stuff from Boston Dynamics and the one from X Engine, which also looks like they have something very similar to Boston Dynamics. Boston Dynamics has always been like, hey, look, maybe we'll get this in 5 years. Yeah, we might actually have robots in our houses in maybe 2 years. And I'm not talking about like a Roomba. We're talking about like a humanoid robot in your house. There's a lot of stuff that's moving really, really fast. 2025 is probably one of the most interesting years we've had in the last decade. And we are in the first 3 months of 2025. And that's, the politics shit can just eat a dick. And to be perfectly honest, if you guys are overly concerned about that, there's a lot more weird shit going on than politics right now. So, yeah, like, we have something's going on here, guys.
Activity in the Neapolitan area.
He's discussing Egypt
Music.
moving on this already?
Here is an activity, an objective. In my opinion, which is poor, therefore to be donated to humanity, and that is certainly the monitoring of hurricanes and therefore going to check, for example, the instantaneous level of activity of active volcanoes. There are vibrations that could bother us in doing our
I don't know exactly what they're talking about right now.
analyses, and the vegetation, for example, produces problems because the wind moves the trees, and basically if one does not.
So, context here is, I think he is mentioning the technology that they're using for this could be potentially used for weather prediction and seismography, so figuring out earthquakes as well as volcanic movement underground using this technology. So lava tubes full of lava, which have a certain density, right? So he's talking about a different application of the technology that they're using here for basically weather, right? Which the technology here, by the way, is really cool. They're basically talking about accessible SAR for very little resources. And we mentioned this at the beginning of the video, for very little resources that you can use pretty much anywhere. And there's a lot of pyramids in a lot of different places of the world that don't really have the motivation or interest in having a full excavation of them, right? And I mean, if there's meter-long tubes under the pyramid of Khafre, yeah, there's a lot of pyramids, guys, and you would not expect there to be fucking 8 giant cylinders under the pyramid of Khafre, or any of the pyramids in general, that goes to a box, which makes them even less likely to be a pyramid. So, yeah, like, the implications of this technology is actually pretty interesting in and of itself, just putting aside what they're found with it.
Analyses and the vegetation, for example, produces problems because the wind moves the trees, and basically if one does not set certain filtering conditions, one ends up not seeing anything. That is why we have put ourselves in the best situation by saying to Gishka, a leaf grows, that's fine, but surely hunger while eating. So we will also go and discover things, in areas such as the pyramids.
I think he's saying, I think that's an idiom, by the way. It must be an Italian idiom. He's saying because they can't use the technology in areas with heavy vegetation, I assume, is what he mentioned there. They're going to a place where there isn't heavy vegetation, which is the pyramids, right?
Of Disso, for example, which have this problem of the vegetation that is above them. However, a Piatina that we have already given it there, but this is another matter. My thought is that the mainstream excitologists will never change because one of the characteristics of the human being is equality. Then there are many Egyptologists who is essentially human. They have written books, they have had the opportunity to issue theories, and maybe before.
This is kind of funny how some of this might look like gobbledygook to you guys, but a lot of these theories and what they're talking about right now translates perfectly to English. He's saying there's a lot of people that make careers or professional lives off of basically their work with Egyptology, or basically the industry there. They're known experts. This upends it, and there's going to be a lot of people that are kind of butthurt about that, or might get blowback because they don't want it to be true, because they're the ones that know everything, right? This is the scientific community bullshit. Yep. So like that you don't need to look at that and go gobbledygook. This stuff like that translates perfectly to English or just scientific criteria in general. And sure, there's going to be plenty of people that push back against it, right? He's talking about that, I think, and how they're going to approach it.
One of the characteristics of the human being is equality then there. Are many Egyptologists, who is essentially human, they have written books, they have had the opportunity to issue theories, and maybe before dying, what do? You demonstrate that what they had written was all wrong. The ex-humans are not so capable at a conscious level of admitting that they could have been wrong. I live in another world. I live in the world where
humans don't like admitting they're wrong when they put their entire life works on it.
Consciousness is the important thing, not the length of the desk in your department. In this context, we know, and consciousness is used to interpret the tomographies, because through consciousness we have introduced a fundamental parameter, which is the human being's perception of what was in front of him. Then in this,
he's talking about basically what they thought was real versus what actually is like changing the world,
I
right?
have learned in life only when I have failed, that is only when I have made a mistake, because when one never makes a mistake, one never learns, or in any case he would not need to learn. Then from this point of view, I would say to the Egyptologists and mainstream, as we have called them, that is no the famous official science. There is no official science, there is science. There are some scientists who are a little more stupid and some scientists who are a little less stupid, but
he's saying that everyone's a scientist, that there isn't just a body of information that is the zeitgeist or the origin of all knowledge, right? So even if there's a scientist that says, no, this is wrong because I've written books about it, you look at the information that is here and everyone changes anyways. The thing in life is you have to change over time, and failures do happen, which is funny because you look at, like with Elon Musk, when the first rocket exploded, Starship exploded, and everyone's like, oh my God, you can't fly these things, they explode. And you're like, bro, do you know what happens in rocketry? Stuff blows up. They go further and further each time, right? That's just the way it works. It's just life, right? Iterative science. It just happens. So he's just saying that basically they're going to have to deal with it.
Basically, it all depends on the level of awareness that one has. I would say, what are the chances that a scientist with this mentality, with this type, the scientist, perhaps a little exaggerated, a scientist, maybe a scientist is another thing, what are the chances that he changes his opinion? We have seen it even recently in the last 3 years of pandemic. People have not changed their opinion despite having written a lot of underscore. So I imagine why, because changing your opinion is like saying, but I was wrong. Here, the moment I say, I was wrong, I'm happy to have been wrong because I learned. Most human beings, on the other hand, are not happy about having made a mistake because they think they made a bad impression.
What a way to end that. So some people don't want to admit they're wrong because then they basically ego, and then other people look down on them for being wrong, but being wrong is basically part of being human, right? So he's basically talking about how the Egyptologists or the scientific community is going to approach the research when it departs so far from the norm, and the blowback that's going to be suffered, but he just says people are going to have to deal with it, is basically the end result there. That was pretty good, guys. That was pretty good. Obviously took long, and there's, I think the combination of the auto-translate mixed with, we call him Charles from the UK, with the addition of Charles from the UK, definitely made things. I think we translated most everything in there. There's mainly the stuff that we had problems with was the mathematician, where they're actually talking about how they, like, he went into the mathematics of basically how they change things, right? That was a little bit hard to translate, but most of the stuff here and everything that they talked about I think I got things pretty much right, where the auto-translation was kind of, it was rough, but we were able to figure it out through context and through what they're talking about when the topic matter popped up. In general, a very good video. Takeaways here, guys, is this happened. the big things here, guys, is this happened. There is going to be another more in-depth press briefing. They said tomorrow, but I believe they mean workday tomorrow, which is Monday, or it's later today, Sunday, or Saturday, excuse me. Later today, Saturday, or tomorrow, meaning Monday. One of the two, I don't know which it is, because they didn't really stipulate that, but I believe it means Monday, which aligns with what I heard earlier prior to today, which was there's going to be a YouTube video on Monday, which tomorrow is Monday, right, for the workday. So there's going to be a release on tomorrow. These things do in fact exist, and they're staking their career on it. Some people are going to be butthurt, which is what we heard at the end there. This technology is applicable and usable around the world with very little cost. There's a lot of pyramids that a lot of people are interested in what they're under there. And I mean, these guys have if they're going to keep it private, they have their work cut out for them. But if it's open to the scientific community, a lot of people are going to be looking at a lot of different things. Like I said, Egypt is not the only culture with pyramids. There's a lot of fucking pyramids around the world, guys. And most of them have not been excavated or basically looked at in a scientific manner beyond basically maybe excavating the top of them, right? But almost none of them have had like LiDAR or SAR or what is it called, geomapping. None of them have had that. So, like, there's a lot of opportunity here, guys, for stuff going on. And this all comes in tandem with this guy right here. Not this video. I don't know who that is. The F-47, which we talked about at the beginning there. There's a lot of really interesting coincidences, guys, that are all happening at the same time. This is probably, this is, out of all the weird shit this year, this is probably the biggest. This is the biggest, exploration advancement. I don't even know what to call this. The biggest thing to happen. Well, for now, and even if those are empty and there's nothing in them, the whole premise of how the fuck they built them in the first place is going to be something that's not going to be answered in a long time. I don't think you can't answer that. They can't be hollow piles because they go to a box at the bottom. They could potentially maybe be hollow piles. I don't know, but they'd have to be able to build them in the first place, which is insane. Hollow piles, as we looked at earlier in the stream, came around in the 1800s. Piles, according to Google, have been around since 600 BC, so a long time ago. Hollow piles, basically the idea that you can basically make a concrete pile or a steel pile that's hollow, has been around for 150 years, 200 years. So not that long. And so very unlikely that they're piles. They mentioned some cool stuff in there which I didn't even think of, which is in the video. They mentioned some of the corridors might be used for HVAC. They're used for not only moving air in and out, but also keeping the temperature comfortable in whatever's down there. They thought of HVAC. They might have thought of HVAC for whatever the fuck this is, guys. That's incredible. That's fucking incredible. Did we, mines didn't even have, like, I don't even know when they figured out, hey, look, we're suffering from CO2 poisoning, and they decided to pump air into mines. That's something I'd say relatively newish, too. Yeah, like, this is some pretty incredible shit, even if there's nothing down there, which I highly doubt. I mean, actually, I might take that back. Because they said the area is probably flooded with water, it could be entirely possible that whatever's down there is basically debunked, assuming that it's prosaic, assuming humans made it. Whatever's down there, books, things that are actually like electronics would be dissolved or just basically turned to garbly-gook. Probably gone, but if they find out that that's actually, like, the non-prosaic explanation is that's something that couldn't have been built by Egyptians, and it's basically not full of shit, which means it still hasn't filled in? Yeah, there is potential there that there's stuff down there that we don't know about. And once again, I think one of the guys in the video said there's already movement in Egypt. Briefly, they mentioned there's movement in Egypt, meaning I think the Egyptian government already realizes that there's something going on here and they have to take a look at it. Besides the short little, like, 2 sentences in the video itself, there isn't really much else to go off of because I haven't heard it anywhere else in here. Yeah, and we will definitely take a look at whatever they release on Monday. This is some pretty incredible stuff. Once again, this is all over this stuff. No one's looking at this channel. I don't understand why. This is the origination of a source of this stuff online. Almost no one's looking at this channel. And this channel is basically where it's all coming from. And yeah, I like this video. I haven't seen this video anywhere on Twitter or any. Like, look how many views it has. It's like no views. even the original announcement videos, which I even talked about on Twitter, have almost no views. There's like no one looking at this stuff, which is incredible. Some of the videos I've seen, kind of shows how poor their online presence is. And by the way, they don't need to hire someone to speak, like to dub it, so like to speak in English, but they should 100% hire someone to make translations, because I can sort of put together what they're talking about. I guarantee you there's a lot of people watching that video that probably can't. There's some interpretation where you actually need to not only be familiar with whatever topic matter they're talking about, but also in the same case, you have to kind of put together the pieces of a non-literal, like a literal translation, and I think there's a lot of people that can't do that. I was able to do it, and you guys were by watching my video. However, most people probably are not able to put together the pieces of what's going on there, in addition to also being familiar with mythology and everything else that's going on. So, yeah, they probably should hire a translator, or which probably is pretty cheap in Egypt. Well, they're in Egypt and Italy. You probably could hire one or whatever. They could 100% do that. But these videos, guys, they have almost no views. The videos of influencers talking about this stuff have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views. Like, pretty incredible stuff. The original videos, the videos from the source itself, have no views. Like, what the fuck is that? I don't know. But this is where we are. This is the timeline we're living in right now, guys. Once again, we're going to cover this on Monday. I thought tonight we were going to play Rivals, and as I mentioned before, this video was members only. I think she changed it. Like, the one over there is members only, too. Because this is probably was ruffling some feathers, because she looks like the communications person, but she's also maybe making some money off this, or maybe sharing it. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but this looks like her personal channel. But at the same time, it's also for this organization. Once again, small businesses, guys, work in weird ways. It's just kind of the way it is. Are these guys non-reputable scientists? No, they've written a white paper. This all looks very legitimate, and I highly doubt these guys are staking their career on 6,000 YouTube views. So I'm pretty certain these guys are not staking their entire career on 6,000 views. So yeah, this is pretty good stuff, guys. I will probably upload this to YouTube too, as well, and maybe later today. But we aren't going to play Rivals tonight, obviously. I didn't even know this was going to be here. This is a 1-hour video, guys. We spent 3 hours talking about it. Well worth the time, in my opinion. Once again, this is what he said, F-47, humanoid robots in your house in probably 2 years, if we looked at the Boston Dynamics and the X-Engine robot, NHIs, UAPs. God, there's so much shit. Psionics, the potential that psionics were actually inhibited in our brain, according to the Canadian research paper, that we actually have psionics and our brain is filtering them out. I mean, there's more. I'm not even thinking of everything now. A lot of shit going on right now, guys, and the least interesting of everything happening right now is politics. So Monday we're going to take a look at this again. We'll see what they have to offer. I really hope more people. I'm going to talk about this online, probably afterwards. So I'm going to make sure that other people on Twitter, especially the UHP crowd, because they love this shit, know about this. But this is the source of information. This is where like some of the people are getting it from, and there's a lot of people parodying each other, which just leads. You know how you play the game of telephone where everyone talks to each other and then it just turns into gobbledygook at the end? There's a lot of, despite copying each other, there's a lot of pieces online that either are missing parts of information or misconstruing information, or they don't have the right information. So, yeah. All right. We're going to get out here, guys. Tonight will be Marvel Rivals, going back and streaming some video games. But for tonight, this morning, this is pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with this. This has answered a lot. The main question that people were going into this is it legit and where is it from? And this is the answer to that in the first half of the video, which we covered. And the last half is basically them talking about the implications of it, talking about the different explanations for it, HVAC being up there with some of the potential of what's going on there, which once again I didn't even think about the temperature difference underground. Yeah, and then they also talked about the timeline of the pyramids, and basically that the pyramids could actually predate ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Egyptians just took over the pyramids and turned them into basically tombs because they could. Because like, hey guys, these are fucking cool. Let's make a burial mound here. Like, yeah, man, that's a good idea. And then we had tombs. But they might not have been tombs in the first place, though, right? Lots of cool stuff, guys. Once again, the next press release, according to the video and according to what I heard online, is going to be on Monday. So keep that in mind, guys. We're going to watch that on Monday, but tonight and tomorrow is going to be Marvel Rivals with some pretty bad EOMM and DDA games. But we're going to get out here for this morning, guys. I'm going to get something to eat. If you are new to the stream and you enjoyed things, reach the follow button on your select platform. I stream to Kick, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Trovo, as well as TikTok every day from late night to early morning, GMT-6. So late night North America time. Now you stream for about 4 to 5 hours, give or take. Depends on my life, what's happening, etc., etc., guys. We're out of here. Tonight will be Rivals. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching my streams as always, and I hope you guys have a wonderfully fantastic Saturday morning. Have a good day, guys.